Hey everyone, tonight we are going to peel back the layers of history to find a connection so obscure yet so obvious once you see it that it might just rewrite how you look at the most famous genius of the Renaissance. We're starting not in an Italian piazza, but in the suffocating heat of the Syrian desert. Staring down a technology that was designed to crush civilizations long before the Mona Lisa ever cracked a smile. You re-standing on the precipice of a war zone where the air is thick with the smell of sulfur and unwashed bodies, witnessing the moment when mathematics was first weaponized in a way that would echo through the centuries. And let's be honest, looking at the size of the rocks flying toward your head, you probably wouldn't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop a comment below, letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing how global this little community has become. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are standing on the sun-baked fortifications of Dura, a Roman outpost perched high above the Euphrates River in what is today modern Syria. The year is 256 AD, give or take a few months, and the situation is, to put it mildly, suboptimal. You can feel the grit of the desert between your teeth, a sensation that no amount of water seems to wash away, mostly because the water ration is currently lukewarm and tastes faintly of bronze. You are a Roman auxiliary, technically a defender of the glorious empire. But right now, you feel more like a glorified security guard at a mall that's about to be demolished. The sun is beating down on your helmet with a personal vendetta, cooking your brain inside your skull, but the heat is the least of your worries. Your real problem is the Sassanid Persians. They are gathered on the plain below, a sprawling ocean of tents, horses, and gleaming metal that seems to stretch all the way to the horizon. This isn't a disorganized rabble of raiders looking for quick loot. This is a superpower. The Sassanid Empire is the new heavyweight champion of the East, and they have decided that your little fortress city is in the way of their expansion plan. You look over the crenellations, squinting against the glare, and you see them moving with terrifying discipline. There are the catapults, heavily armored cavalry that look like tanks made of meat and iron, and there are the archers, who can supposedly shoot a fly off a mule's ear from 300 paces. But what makes your stomach drop isn't the soldiers, it's the construction crews. Usually, when you think of ancient warfare, you think of shouting men clashing shields. But here, the loudest sound isn't a war cry, it's the rhythmic thud-thud-thud of hammers and the groaning of timber. The Persians are building something. You watch as they assemble massive wooden frames, dragging heavy beams into place with teams of oxen. These aren't just ladders or battering rams, You've seen Roman ballistas before, precise and deadly. But what the Persians are constructing feels different, heavier, stranger, more primal. It's like watching a neighbor assemble a grill, except the grill is the size of a two-story house and it's designed to throw flaming death into your living room. You lean against the warm stone of the wall, trying to calculate your odds of survival. They aren't great. The Sassanids are pioneers in siege warfare, combining engineering prowess with a ruthless efficiency that makes Roman bureaucracy look like a chaotic kindergarten class. Historians still argue whether the specific machines you are looking at are fully developed traction, trebuchets borrowed from Chinese designs, or an advanced, supercharged evolution of the torsion catapult. But frankly, when a 50-pound stone is hurling toward your face at terminal velocity, the academic distinction regarding its propulsion method becomes somewhat irrelevant. Suddenly, a deep, resonant thwack echoes across the dry valley. It's the sound of thick ropes snapping taut, a release of tension that you feel in your chest. A beat of silence follows, just enough time for you to wonder if they missed. Then, a dark shape crests the arc of the sky, growing larger with impossible speed. It smashes into the wall about 20 feet to your left. Stone shatters. Dust explodes outward, coating you in a fine, choking powder. The vibration travels up your legs, rattling your knees inside your greaves. This isn't just a rock, it's a statement. The Romans were supposed to be the engineers of the world, the masters of roads and aqueducts and walls. But here, on the edge of the empire, you are being out-engineered. The Persians have mastered the physics of leverage and tension. They understand that if you apply enough force to a fulcrum, you can bypass the bravery of the soldier entirely. It's a sobering realization. You aren't fighting a person, you are fighting a math equation. and the math is winning. You wipe the dust from your eyes and look down again. They are reloading. The speed is terrifying. This isn't any off shot, it's a barrage. The logistics required to keep those machines fed with ammunition is mind-boggling. Yet there they are, a conveyor belt of destruction. You turn to your comrade, a guy named Lucius, who owes you 5 denarii, and try to make a joke about how this wasn't in the recruitment pamphlet, but the look on his face stops you. He's staring at the ground, or rather, at the vibration in the ground. It's not just the air attack. The ground beneath your sandals is trembling. This brings us to one of the most chilling aspects of the siege of Dueropos, a detail that proves just how scientifically advanced this enemy is. They aren't just going over the walls, they are going under them. The Sassanids are digging, sapping tunnels, attempting to collapse the towers by eating away the earth beneath them. But the Romans, ever the clever architects, are digging counter-tunnels to intercept them. It's a subterranean game of cat and mouse played in pitch blackness. Later, archaeologists excavating this site will find something that looks like a scene from a horror movie frozen in amber. In one of these tunnels, they will discover the bodies of 19 Roman soldiers and 1 Persian soldier locked in a narrow corridor. But they didn't die from sword wounds. Evidence suggests the Sassanids placed a brazier full of sulfur and bitumen, essentially crude oil, at the entrance of the tunnel and used bellows to pump the toxic smoke. Toward the Romans, as the Romans charged in to stop the diggers, they ran face first into a wall of sulfuric acid gas. Their lungs would have dissolved in seconds. It is the earliest archaeological evidence of chemical warfare in history. You, thankfully, are up on the wall breathing the relatively fresh air of the battlefield. But the knowledge that the enemy is literally dissolving the lungs of your friends beneath your feet adds a layer of psychological terror that is hard to shake. You realize that this enemy views war as a series of problems to be solved with physics and chemistry. The wall is a problem. Throw rocks over it. The defenders are a problem. Gas them out. As night falls, the bombardment continues. The sky is streaked with burning pots of naphtha, an early incendiary weapon that sticks to everything it touches wood. Cloth skin refuses to be extinguished by water. It's basically ancient napalm. You watch the arcs of fire trace parabolas in the dark sky. Beautiful and deadly geometry lessons written in flame. You might be wondering what any of this has to do with a pacifist vegetarian artist living in Florence more than 1,000 years later. Well, as you watch that Persian catapult reset for another shot, you are witnessing the birth of a lineage. The mechanics of that machine, the specific way the timber is joined, the ratio of the throwing arm, the method of winding the rope, these are not secrets that will vanish into the sand when Dueropos falls. Ideas are harder to kill than soldiers. The survivors of these wars, the engineers who build these monsters, will write things down. They will draw diagrams. Those diagrams will be copied, translated, stolen, and smuggled. They will travel from the dusty plains of Syria through the great libraries of Baghdad, across the Mediterranean, and eventually into the cluttered, candlelit studio of a man named Leonardo. But for now, you just need to keep your head down. Another rock is coming. Let's take a daring hypothetical walk off that crumbling wall and sneak across the no man's land, dodging the arrows and the pools of burning naphtha to get a closer look at the thing that is currently ruining your day. If you manage to stand right next to one of these Sassanid engines without getting speared by a guard, the first thing you indeed notice is that it doesn't look like the catapults you see in Hollywood movies. There is no massive swinging box filled with rocks, and there is no giant twisted bundle of rope cranking back like a rubber band. What you are looking at is a traction trebuchet, a piece of engineering that is deceptively simple and terrifyingly effective. In the history of military hardware, this is the grandfather of the artillery barrage. The structure is basic. A massive wooden beam rests on a fulcrum, like a giant playground seesaw. On the long end of the seesaw is a sling made of leather or rope, cradling a rock the size of a watermelon. But the magic hand, the horror, happens at the short end. There is no heavy box of rocks acting as a counterweight here. Instead, dangling from the short end of the beam are dozens of thick hemp ropes, and holding those ropes is the engine's power source, a team of human beings. This is the traction trebuchet. It is powered entirely by human muscle. You watch as the crew sets up for a shot. It's a fascinating rhythmic dance of violence. A master engineer stands to the side, barking orders. He's the conductor of this orchestra. At his signal, about 40 or 50 men grab the ropes. These guys are built like linebackers, sweating profusely, their muscles coiled like springs. They crouch low, waiting for the beat. When the engineer screams the command, probably, something that translates to heave, the men all pull down simultaneously with every ounce of strength they possess. The physics here is brutal, but elegant. Because the men are pulling on the short end of the lever, their downward force whips the long end of the beam up into the air with incredible speed. It's the same principle as using a stick to throw a ball for a dog, but scaled up to siege levels. The sling swings around, accelerates the projectile, and releases it at the top of the arc. The rock flies, the beam slams against a padded stop, and the men on the ropes stumble backward, gasping for breath. It sounds primitive, right? Just a bunch of guys pulling on a stick. But don't underestimate it. A well-drilled Sassanid crew can reload and fire this thing faster than you can order a coffee. We are talking about a rate of fire that Roman torsion catapults, which relied on twisting sinew and cranking gears, could only dream of. The Romans had accuracy and power, but the tension in their machines took forever to build up. You had to ratchet it back, click by click. These Persian machines, as soon as the men catch their breath and a new rock is loaded, bam, another shot. It allows for a suppressing fire that keeps defenders' heads down permanently. Now here is where we get into the murky waters of historical origins, because historians still argue fiercely about where exactly this technology came from. The prevailing theory is that the traction trebuchet wasn't actually a Middle Eastern invention at all. Many scholars believe it originated in China, developed by the Mohista philosophical school that, ironically, was all about universal love and defensive warfare. They were the peace through superior firepower guys of the ancient world. The theory goes that this technology traveled along the Silk Road, passed from hand to hand, army to army, until it reached the Sassanids, who looked at it and said, "We'll take 10. Whatever the origin, the Sassanids have perfected it. They've optimized the length of the sling to maximize range. They've calculated the exact number of pullers needed for different weights of stone. It's a mathematics of flesh and wood. But there is a dark side to this design, aside from the obvious killing people part. Being a puller on a traction trebuchet is arguably one of the worst jobs in the ancient world. You are essentially a human battery. The physical toll is immense. You aren't just pulling, you are absorbing the shock of the machine every single time. And if the team isn't perfectly synchronized, if one guy pulls a fraction of a second too late, the beam twists, the shot goes wide, or worse, the beam snaps and sends splinters the size of spears flying into the crew. This is why the Sassanids are so dangerous. They treat their soldiers as components of the machine. The Romans, for all their discipline, view their artillery as tools operated by specialists. The Sassanids view the unit as the weapon. The men pulling the ropes are just as much a part of the mechanism as the wood and the nails. It's a philosophy of total integration. As you stare at this wooden monster, you notice the details that make it a masterpiece of logistics. The wood isn't just random lumber, it's likely seasoned hardwood, imported from the mountains, because the local desert scrub doesn't grow straight or strong enough. The ropes are likely hemp or flax, constantly inspected for fraying. And the sling, that's the most critical part. If one side of the sling releases a millisecond too early, the rock flies straight up and comes down on the crew's heads. If it releases too late, it slams into the ground in front of the machine, crushing the puller's toes. So the gunner in charge of the release pin is basically the most popular or hatad guy on the team. His timing is the difference between a successful siege and a workplace accident report that nobody wants to write. There's a quirky little tidbit about these machines that you might appreciate. In later centuries, as this technology spreads to Europe, chroniclers will give them colorful names. They'll be called mangonels or pecheries. But the Romans had a nickname for their own earlier torsion-based catapults that feels appropriate here too, the onagar or wild donkey. Why? Because when the machine fired, the recoil was so violent that the back end would kick up like a stubborn mule. Standing behind one of these things was a great way to get a concussion from a piece of bouncing timber. But back to the Sassanids, they didn't just build one or two of these. At a major siege, they would line up dozens. Imagine the psychological impact. You are on the wall, and you see 50 of these beams rising and falling in a rhythmic wave, like the pistons of a giant invisible engine. The air is filled with a constant stream of rocks, pots of fire, and sometimes, if they were feeling particularly nasty, human heads, or dead animals to spread disease. It represents a shift in how humanity approached problem solving. It's the industrialization of throwing stuff. Before this, if you wanted to hit someone with a rock, you used a sling or your arm. The energy was limited by your body. The traction trebuchet broke that limit by aggregating the strength of 50 men into a single point of impact. It's the ancient equivalent of a force multiplier. And this, right here, is the blueprint that will survive the fall of Rome. The Romans will eventually adopt these machines because they are cheaper and easier to build than their complex torsion engines. The torsion engines, those complicated bundles of twisted sinew and horsehair, require specialized maintenance. If the humidity changes, the tension changes. If it rains, the sinew goes slack. But a traction trebuchet, it's just a lever and gravity. It works in the rain, it works in the sand, it works as long as you have guys strong enough to pull a rope. This durability is what allows the design to endure. It will be drawn on vellum scrolls, packed into saddlebags, and carried across continents. It will sit in the libraries of the East, waiting for a new golden age to rediscover it. But before we get to the libraries, we have to talk about what they are throwing. Because while rocks are bad, the Sassanids have something much, much worse. If the rhythmic thud of the traction trebuchets is the heartbeat of this siege, then the smell drifting from the supply tents is its toxic breath. You walk away from the wooden monsters and toward the ammunition dump, and suddenly the air changes. The dry, dusty scent of the desert vanishes, replaced by a pungent, acrid aroma that stings your nostrils and makes your eyes water. It smells like a modern gas station that has been left to rot in the sun, mixed with the sharp tanks of sulfur and pine resin. You are standing in the presence of the ancient world's nuclear option, naphtha. While the rocks crushing the walls are terrifying, they are predictable. Physics is fair. If a rock hits you, you die. If it misses, you live. But what the Sassanid chemists are brewing in these clay pots is unfair. It is a weapon that doesn't just kill, it erases. You watch as a team of specialists, let's call them pyrotechnicians, though they look more like nervous priests of a dark god, carefully handle the ammunition. They are holding ceramic containers, roughly the size of a grapefruit or a pineapple, often shaped like a cone or a sphere with a small opening at the top. These aren't just random jars grabbed from a kitchen. Archaeologists will later call them spheroconical vessels, and for decades, museums will label them as perfume bottles or mercury containers. But you know better, because you are watching a man with trembling hands pour a thick, black, viscous sludge into one. This sludge is the nightmare of the ancient battlefield. The Middle East is geologically unique. In certain places, the earth bleeds black oil. The Sassanids, and the Babylonians before them, didn't need deep-sea drilling rigs to find petroleum. It bubbled up in surface seeps, forming sticky pools of bitumen and crude oil. They gathered it, refined it, and weaponized it. But here is where the science gets really nasty. Naphtha by itself is just flammable oil. If you throw a cup of oil at a wall and light it, it burns, sure, but it drips off. The Sassanid military engineers realized that to make it truly effective, it needed to stick. They needed it to cling to vertical wooden palisades, to stone, and, unfortunately, to human skin. So, they turned their war camps into chemistry labs. Historians still argue fiercely about the exact recipe used during this specific period. Some insist it was a pure distillate of petroleum, while others argue for a complex cocktail involving pine resin to make it sticky, sulfur to make the smoke choking and toxic, and quicklime, which terrifyingly ignites when it touches water. This debate is the historical equivalent of trying to figure out the Colonel's secret blend of herbs and spices. Except this blend melts your face off. Whatever the specific mixture in the pot you are looking at, the effect is undeniable. It is essentially ancient napalm. You watch the pyrotechnician stopper the pot with a piece of linen or hemp, leaving a bit of the fabric trailing out as a fuse. He dips the fuse in a lighter oil. Now comes the moment of truth. He walks over to the traction trebuchet. The crew on the ropes looks nervous. They should be. If a rock falls out of the sling during the windup, everyone gets a bruised shin. If a naphtha pot falls and breaks, the entire crew burns to death in a screaming, sticky inferno. The pot is loaded, the command is given. The fuse is little tiny spark of orange against the blue sky. Heave. The beam whips up gentler this time because you don't want to shatter the ceramic in the sling. The pot arcs high over the Roman walls. You track its flight. It looks harmless, just a small, dark speck. Then it strikes the roof of a defensive tower. Crack! The sound is different from the stone impacts. It's a hollow smash, followed immediately by a whoosh of expanding air. A splash of black liquid erupts outward, and a split second later, it ignites. The fire doesn't behave like a wood fire. It doesn't flicker and dance. It roars. It is a hungry, violent orange that clings to the roof tiles. You see a Roman defender rush forward with a bucket of water and natural instinct. He throws the water on the flames. Huge mistake. Because of the oil base, the water doesn't extinguish the fire. It spreads it. The burning liquid floats on top of the water, flowing down the ramparts like a river of lava, setting fire to everything in its path. The defender realizes too late that he has just made things infinitely worse. This is the psychological terror of naphtha. It inverts the laws of nature. Water is supposed to save you. Here, it kills you. There is a quirky, almost morbid tidbit about the men who handled this stuff. You might notice that the pyrotechnicians handling the raw naphtha are wearing unusually heavy, treated leather gloves and aprons. Some historical accounts from later periods in the region suggest that specialized fire troops wore clothes dipped in vinegar, or even dusted with talc and powdered mica attempts at fire-retardant gear. It's a primitive hazmat suit. They know that static electricity isn't a concept they have a word for yet, but they understand friction makes sparks, and sparks in the naphtha tent mean everyone dies. The Sassanids are using this bombardment to systematically dismantle the Roman defenses. They aren't just trying to burn the city down. They are targeting the machines. Remember those Roman countertunnels? The Persians are aiming for the wooden support beams that hold up the Roman siege towers. It's a precision strike. They are using chemistry to defeat architecture. As you watch another volley of firepots streak across the sky, you realize something profound about the evolution of warfare. For thousands of years, war was about kinetic energy hitting things hard. A club, a sword, an arrow, a rock. But this is chemical energy. This is releasing the stored power of the sun, trapped in ancient fossilized plankton to destroy your enemy. It is a leap in abstraction. You aren't hitting them with your strength. You are hitting them with the Earth's volatility. And the terror it inspires is total. You can block a sword. You can hide from an arrow. You can reinforce a wall against a rock. You cannot block liquid fire. It seeps through cracks. It drips through helmet visors. It consumes the oxygen in the air, suffocating you even if the flames don't touch you. This technology, this concept of the grenade and the flamethrower, will not stay in the desert. It will travel. The Byzantines will refine it into the legendary Greek fire, a weapon so secret that the formula was whispered only from emperor to emperor and eventually lost to time. But the basic idea, the ceramic pot, the combustible fluid, the fuse will remain. Centuries later, a curious artist in Italy will sketch designs for bombards and fire throwers that look suspiciously like industrialized versions of these Sassanid pots. He will draw men carrying air-filled bladders to breathe underwater while setting fire to enemy ships. Leonardo da Vinci will be fascinated by the destructive power of fire, by the idea of weapons that cause panic and chaos rather than just blunt trauma. And as you watch the smoke rise from the burning Roman tower, you are seeing the original inspiration for every incendiary weapon that will ever be drawn in a sketchbook or deployed on a battlefield. But for now, the Sassanids have a problem. They have the machines and they have the ammo. But they are in the middle of a desert, hundreds of miles from their capital. How do you get a machine the size of a house and enough flammable sludge to burn a city across an ocean of sand without a single truck, train, or crane? You look away from the fire and toward the horizon where a line of dust suggests a supply column is arriving. It's time to look at the logistical nightmare that makes this engineering possible. You think your commute is bad. You have no idea. Turn your back on the burning city and look out into the nothingness. The Syrian desert is a landscape of stark, unforgiving, beauty-vast stretches of ochre earth, scrub brush, and heat shimmer that distorts the horizon like a funhouse mirror. But cutting through this emptiness is a miracle of organization that rivals the siege engines themselves. You are watching the supply chain of the Sassanid army, a logistical beast that has to feed, water, and arm tens of thousands of men and animals in an environment that actively wants them dead. You trudge out to meet the incoming caravan, your boots kicking up clouds of fine silt. The first thing you hear is the groaning, not of men, but of wooden wheels. The Sassanids didn't have the luxury of dismantling their siege engines into conveniently flat-packed IKEA boxes for every journey, while the smaller components could be broken down. The massive main beams of the traction, trebuchets throwing arms, were often transported whole to maintain their structural integrity. You see a team of 20 oxen straining against yokes, dragging a loads-long, heavy-duty wagon. On it rests a single timber, arguably 40 feet long, seasoned oak or perhaps imported ticket. It's a tree that has traveled further than most people in the ancient world ever will. Moving something this heavy without modern hydraulics or paved roads is a nightmare of physics. The wheels of the wagon are wide, rimmed with iron, designed to float on the sand rather than sink into it. But even so, they churn the earth into deep ruts. Every few hundred yards, the wagon gets stuck. You watch as the driver's men, whose skin is leathered by the sun and whose patience must be infinite, shout commands. They don't just whip the animals. That's rookie stuff. They use leverage. They jam wedges under the wheels, lay down tracks of woven matting, and coordinate the oxen to pull in sudden, unified bursts. It's the same principle as the trebuchet itself, concentrated force applied at the right moment. But the real marvel isn't the wood, it's the water. An army marches on its stomach, sure, but it dies without water. You are in a desert. A single soldier needs gallons a day to survive the heat and the exertion. A horse needs more. An elephant? Don't even ask. The Sassanids have solved this with a system of mobile reservoirs. You see camels carrying specifically designed leather bladders treated with beeswax to prevent evaporation. But more impressively, you see the Connaught engineers. These aren't soldiers, they are hydrologists. As the army moves, these specialists scout the terrain, reading the subtle dips in the landscape that indicate groundwater. They dig temporary wells with frightening speed, tapping into aquifers deep below the sand. It's a reminder that engineering isn't always about building up. Sometimes it's about digging down. Without these guys, the fancy catapults and the naphtha pots would be useless, because everyone would be dead of dehydration in 3 days. Then there are the mechanics on the march. You spot a wagon that is essentially a rolling hardware store. It's filled with spare parts, bronze bushings, iron nails, coils of hemp rope, and buckets of animal fat for lubrication. You realize that keeping a siege engine operational in the desert is a constant battle against the elements. The heat dries out the wood, making it brittle. The sand gets into the rope fibers, acting like sandpaper, and fraying them from the inside out. The mechanics have to inspect every inch of the machine every single day. If a throwing arm snaps under tension because of a dry rot crack nobody noticed, it kills the crew. So these guys are the unsung heroes. They are out there with pots of grease, slathering the axles and the fulcrums, wrapping the ropes in protective cloth. It's a dirty, greasy, unglamorous job that keeps the war machine turning. Here is a quirky reality check for you. The spare parts often included spare people. The Sassanid logistics officers calculated attrition rates with chilling accuracy. They knew that dysentery, heat stroke, and accidents would claim a certain percentage of the workforce. So, the supply columns included groups of reserve laborers, often prisoners of war, or levied peasants who were there essentially as human spare tires. If a trebuchet puller broke an arm, a replacement was slotted in from the reserve pool immediately. It's a cold, utilitarian view of human life, but it's what kept the bombardment continuous. Historians still argue about the extent of the Sassanid road network during this specific campaign. Some claim they relied almost entirely on existing Roman roads once they crossed the border, effectively using the enemy's own infrastructure against them. Others argue the Sassanids were masters of temporary road building, laying down corduroy roads of logs and brush over soft sand to allow heavy siege towers to pass. Imagine the noise of this column, the bellows of camels, the creak of wagons, the shouting of drivers in a dozen different dialects. It's a moving city, and in the middle of it all, wrapped in layers of protective wool, are the delicate things: the alchemical glasswork, the measuring instruments, the astrolabes used for navigation, the scrolls containing the mathematical tables for ballistic trajectories. This is the intellectual cargo. You see a scribe riding a mule, clutching a leather case. Inside that case are the firing tables. Yes, they had cheat sheets. You don't do complex calculus in your head while arrows are flying at you. You look up the distance, look up the projectile weight, and the table tells you how many men need to pull and where to set the fulcrum. This data was gathered through trial and error over decades of warfare, written down and carried into battle. As you walk alongside this scribe, you realize that he is carrying the seeds of the future. The Roman Empire is crumbling. The West is entering a period of fragmentation and data loss, often called the Dark Ages, though historians hate that term. It fits the mood. But here, in this wagon train, the data is safe. The knowledge of how to build, how to calculate, how to mix chemical fires, it is being preserved, codified, and transported. When Duriarapos falls, the Romans will retreat. The libraries of Europe will rot or burn. But these Sassanid manuals, these firing tables, and chemical recipes will be carried back east. They will survive the shifting sands of politics and religion. They will eventually find a home in a new city that is yet to be built, a city that will become the intellectual capital of the world, Baghdad. But the journey from the desert to the House of Wisdom is a long one. And as the sun sets on the Sassanid camp, casting long shadows from the silent siege engines, you can almost see the thread of history stretching out. The logistical mastery, you are witnessing the ability to move complex technology across vast distances. The precursor to the global exchange of ideas. For now, though, you are just tired. The dust is in your lungs. The smell of camels is overpowering. You watch the mechanics grease the axle of a giant wagon one last time before the night watch takes over. They are unaware that they are keeping the ancestors of the tank and the cannon alive. They're just trying to keep the wheels turning, and turn they do. The wheel of history spins, and soon the desert will be left behind. We are about to fast forward through the centuries, leaving the heat of Syria for the cool marble halls of a place where these rough instruments of war will be refined into pure science. The dust is settling, but the ink is just starting to flow. Shake the desert sand from your cloak and step out of the blinding sun. The roaring heat of the Syrian waste fades, replaced by the cool, hushed sanctity of a space that smells of cedarwood, gallnut ink, and the sheer electric potential of human thought. You have traveled forward in time, crossing the invisible boundary between the ancient world and the medieval, arriving in the beating heart of the 9th century. You are in Baghdad, but this isn't just a city. It is the Round City, a masterpiece of urban planning constructed in concentric circles, and you are standing at its center. While Europe is currently muddling through a period of fragmented feudalism and losing the recipes for concrete, here, under the Abbasid Caliphate, the lights are on. In fact, they are burning brighter than they ever did in Rome. You are inside the legendary Beit al-Hikmoth, the House of Wisdom. Take a moment to absorb the scale of this place. It is part library, part university, and part translation bureau. The shelves around you floor-to-ceiling stacks of scrolls and leather-bound codices. The silence here is heavy, but it's not the silence of a tomb. It's the silence of intense concentration. You walk past long tables where scholars of every ethnicity, Persians, Greeks, Indians, Arabs, Christians, Jews are sitting shoulder to shoulder, their heads bowed over manuscripts. This is the translation movement, a state-sponsored project that rivals the Manhattan Project in its ambition. The caliphs have sent agents to every corner of the known world with a blank check and a simple order. Bring us the knowledge. They are buying books by their weight in gold. Sassanid engineering manuals, Greek geometry texts by Euclid and Archimedes, Indian treatises on mathematics. Everything is being brought here, translated into Arabic and synthesized. You stop at a desk where a young scholar is carefully copying a diagram. You lean in and recognize the shape. It's the traction trebuchet. The rough, practical sketches of the Sassanid field engineers you saw in the desert have been refined. The lines are straighter, the math is clearer. The Arabic script flowing around the diagram explains the physics of the lever with a precision that the Romans never quite bothered to write down. The weapon has become a science. But the scholars here aren't just preserving the past, they are playing with it. And this brings us to the Banu Mosa brothers. You spot 3 men arguing quietly in a corner, surrounded by sketches of gears, valves, and siphons. These are the sons of Musa ibn Shaki Muhammad, Ahmad, and Al-Hazan. They are the rock stars of the House of Wisdom. They are working on their masterpiece, the Kitab al-Hayal, or the Book of Ingenious Devices. If you look over their shoulders, you won't just see weapons, you'll see toys. But these are toys that require a PhD to build. They are designing a mechanical flute player that uses steam and pneumatic pressure to play music automatically. they are sketching a vessel that refills itself with water, using a hidden float valve mechanism that will one day be used in every toilet tank in the modern world. There is a quirky, almost whimsical nature to their work that contrasts sharply with the brutality of the siege engines. For instance, they designed a drinking bull automaton. It was a mechanical model of a bull that made a sound of contentment when it finished drinking water from a trough. Why? Just to see if they could. It was engineering for the sheer joy of mastery. But don't let the whimsy fool you. The valves, the cranks, and the pressurized systems they are inventing for these party tricks are the exact same mechanisms needed to build heavy artillery and hydraulic lifts. They are disguising military-industrial capacity as court entertainment. This is a crucial link in our chain. The Banu Musa and their contemporaries are taking the raw brute force mechanics of the Sassanids and refining the components. They are figuring out how to reduce friction. They are standardizing the sizes of gears. They are creating a universal language of mechanics. However, walking through these halls, you encounter a shadow of doubt that lingers in the academic world today. Historians still argue fiercely about what the House of Wisdom actually was. Was it a single, massive building like the Library of Alexandria? Or was it more of an abstract concept, a collective term for the private libraries of the caliphs and the loose network of scholars working in Baghdad? Some evidence suggests there was no grand central hall with a sign over the door, but rather a diffuse culture of learning spread across the city's palaces. But as you stand there, watching a translator struggle with a difficult passage of Greek, the physical reality feels less important than the result. The result is that the knowledge didn't die. It was incubated. You wander deeper into the archives and find a section dedicated to war machines. Here, the tone shifts. The playful automata are gone. The diagrams show massive mangonels, battering rams encased in fireproof iron sheeting, and portable towers. You see a treatise on naphtha, projecting, expanding on the chemical warfare you witnessed at Durapos. The Arabs have taken the sticky Sassanid fire and refined the delivery system. They are designing copper tubes with pump-action pistons to spray the liquid fires, essentially the first flamethrowers. You also notice something else: paper. This is a huge deal. The Sassanids wrote on parchment or clay. The Egyptians used fragile papyrus, but here in Baghdad, you hear the crisp rustle of paper. The technology was captured from Chinese prisoners of war. Another benefit of the empire expanding east and set up in paper mills right here in the city. Paper is cheaper, lighter, and easier to bind than parchment. This means knowledge is no longer just for the elite. It can be mass-produced. It means a manual on how to build a trebuchet can be copied 100 times and sent to every fortress on the frontier. This democratization of information is dangerous. It means the secrets of the high engineers are trickling down to the common captains of the guard. As you run your hand over a stack of fresh paper, you realize that you are looking at the bridge between East and West. These manuscripts won't stay in Baghdad forever. The trade routes are open. Merchants are buying these books. Soon, this knowledge will bleed out of the Islamic world and trickle into the fringes of a darkened Europe through Spain, through Sicily, and through the violent contact of the Crusades. You pause at a window, looking out over the Tigris River. The sun is setting, casting a golden glow over the city of domes. It feels peaceful, rational, ordered. But you know what's coming. History doesn't let golden ages last forever. The Mongols are on the horizon, far in the future, but closer in time is a different kind of conflict. The physics of the lever and the chemistry of fire are about to be tested against the walls of Jerusalem and Acre. The intellectual exercises of the Banu Musa are about to leave the theoretical stage and re-enter the muddy, bloody reality of war. But before we leave the tranquility of the House of Wisdom, take one last look at that diagram of the trebuchet. Notice how the scholars have started to tweak the design. The human pullers are still there in the drawings, but in the margins, someone has sketched a question mark. Someone is doing the math on gravity. They are wondering, what if we've replaced the men with a box of earth? What if we let nature do the pulling? You are staring at the embryonic thought that will turn the traction trebuchet into the counterweight trebuchet, the nuclear weapon of the Middle Ages. And that thought is about to change everything. Step out of the cool shadows of the House of Wisdom and into the blinding, dusty glare of the 12th century. The quiet scratching of quills on parchment has been replaced by the deafening sound of saws biting into old-growth timber. You are standing in the shadow of a construction project that feels less like a weapon and more like a cathedral dedicated to the god of destruction. You are witnessing the moment when humanity decided to fire the guys pulling the ropes and hire a new employee. We are looking at the birth of the counterweight trebuchet. If the traction trebuchet was a machine gun fast, suppressing but limited in individual punch, this is the heavy artillery. It is slow, lumbering, and absolutely devastating. Walk around the base of this monster. The first thing that hits you is the sheer scale. The traction trebuchets you saw in the desert were big, sure, but this thing is architectural. The base frame is made of tree trunks, so thick you couldn't wrap your arms around them. The throwing arm, rising high into the sky, tapers like the mast of a ship. But the real game-changer is hanging off the short end of that beam. Gone is the spiderweb of ropes for 40 sweating men. In its place is a massive wooden box, heavily reinforced with iron bands. It looks like a coffin for a giant. And in a way, it is. You watch as laborers haul baskets of earth, rocks, and lead ingots up a ramp, dumping them into this box. This is the counterweight. The logic is brutally simple. Instead of relying on the explosive, twitch muscle energy of humans who get tired, hungry, and scared, you rely on the constant, unwavering force of the planet itself. Gravity never calls in sick. Gravity never asks for a raise. Gravity pulls at 9.8 meters per second squared, every single time, forever. The physics here represents a massive leap in understanding potential energy. You watch the loading process. It's agonizingly slow compared to the rapid-fire Sassanid engines. A massive winch, turned by a team of men, or sometimes oxen walking in a circle, slowly cranks the long end of the beam down. As the throwing arm lowers, that massive box of rocks on the other end rises, creak, groan, click. The tension in the wood is palpable. You can hear the fibers complaining. They are storing an immense amount of energy. The counterweight, which might weigh 10 or 20 tons, is now hovering in the air, desperate to return to the earth. It is a hanging guillotine of force. When the trigger is finally hit, usually by a brave soul striking a locking pin with a Melitha release, is terrifying. It's not a snap like the traction machines. It's a whoosh that starts low and builds to a roar. The counterweight drops, the beam swings up, the sling whips around, and the projectile, it doesn't just fly, it soars. We are talking about stones weighing 300 pounds or more, hurling through the air with enough kinetic energy to punch a hole through a stone curtain wall, as if it were made of wet cardboard. But evolution is rarely a straight line. Before engineers fully committed to this gravity-powered beast, there was an awkward teenage phase. If you look closely at some of the older blueprints from this era, specifically from the 11th and early 12th centuries, you'll see something strange. You'll see a machine that has both a counterweight and ropes for pulling. This is the hybrid trebuchet. It's the missing link of siege warfare. Historians still argue fiercely about who exactly came up with this transitional design. Was it the Byzantines trying to upgrade their defenses? Was it the Seljuk Turks? Or was it an indigenous European invention? There is a school of thought suggesting that the hybrid was the result of engineers not quite trusting the math yet. They added the counterweight to help, but they kept the pulling crew just in case. It's like keeping the training wheels on a Ducati. Regardless of who drew it first, the hybrid reveals a fascinating anxiety about technology. The shift to pure gravity required a leap of faith. It meant sacrificing speed for power. A traction trebuchet could fire 4 shots a minute. A counterweight trebuchet might manage 2 shots an hour. You had to be very, very sure that when you did fire, it was going to count. Here is a quirky logistical reality check that most movies skip: the ammo crisis. With a traction trebuchet, you could throw almost anything: rough stones, pots, heads. But with a counterweight trebuchet, the physics are finicky. If the stone is too light, the beam swings too fast and might snap the machine. If it's too heavy, it flops a few yards and everyone laughs at you. So, you see masons sitting near the machine, chiseling stones into uniform spheres. They are calibrating the ammunition to the machine. This is the beginning of standardization. You can't just pick up a rock from a riverbed anymore. You have to manufacture the projectile. This slows everything down and makes the siege incredibly expensive. You are literally throwing money at the enemy walls. And speaking of money, let's talk about the names. You don't name a disposable traction trebuchet, but a counterweight trebuchet. You name it like a ship or a pet. Historical records are full of these personalities. There was the bad neighbor, God's stone thrower, and the most famous one of all, King Edward I's werewolf, which was so terrifying that the Scots surrendered just seeing it built. Edward, being a bit of a jerk, refused the surrender because he wanted to see it fire at least once. But right now, you are watching the earlier ancestors of the werewolf. You are seeing the technology drift westward. The Crusades are the great conductor here. When European knights marched east, they expected to fight barbarians. Instead, they walked into a wall of superior engineering. They saw these gravity-powered monsters smashing their fortifications in the Holy Land and thought, we need to get us some of those. The cultural exchange was violent but effective. You can imagine a captured engineer being persuaded to draw the schematics for a Frankish lord, or a Templar knight sketching the mechanism in his journal while under bombardment. The knowledge was bleeding across the battle lines. As you watch the crew grease the massive axle of the counterweight with animal fat, the smell is rancid. By the way, like a butcher shop left in the sun, you realize that the world has gotten smaller. The distance between a Persian idea and a European castle is shrinking. The lever of the Sassanids, refined by the mathematicians of Baghdad, is now being loaded with the heavy stones of the Mediterranean. But there is one more element to this machine that makes it truly special, and it's something Leonardo da Vinci will obsess over centuries later: the sling. You notice that the sling isn't just attached directly to the beam. It drags along a wooden trough at the base of the machine before whipping upward. This extends the acceleration time. It's the same principle as a pitcher's windup. The stone accelerates along the ground before it lifts off. It is a brilliant way to squeeze every ounce of energy out of the falling counterweight. Leonardo will later fill pages of his notebooks analyzing this specific motion, the whip effect. He will try to calculate the perfect length of the sling relative to the beam. He will realize that this isn't just brute force. It's a complex relationship of ratios. But for the men operating it right now, there is no time for calculus. The master engineer shouts a warning. Everyone clears the area. The pin is struck. Whoosh! The ground shakes as the counterweight slams down. You crane your neck to watch the stone fly. It hangs in the air for an impossibly long time, a dark moon against the blue sky, before crashing into a distant tower with a sound like thunder. The age of gravity has arrived. And for the men standing on the walls of the city of Acre, peering nervously at the horizon, the bad news is just beginning, because the Crusaders are at the gates, and they have brought their new toys with them. Adjust your helmet and grip the rough sun-warmed stone of the battlements. You are now standing on the walls of Acre, the last great Crusader stronghold in the Holy Land. The year is 1291. The breeze coming off the Mediterranean behind you smells of salt and rotting seaweed, but the wind blowing from the land in front of you smells of something far worse: imminent doom. You are a European knight, or perhaps a mercenary engineer, wearing mail that is far too heavy for this climate. You've heard stories of the infidel technology, whispered rumors of machines that can throw mountains, but today the rumors have parked themselves on your front lawn. Looking out over the plain, you see a city of tents that stretches to the horizon. This is the army of the Mamluk Sultanate, and they haven't just brought swords and horses, they have brought an industrial park. Historical accounts tell us the Mamluks hauled nearly 100 siege engines to Acre. Just let that number sink in. Usually, a siege might have 2 or 3 big guns. Here, you are staring at a forest of timber, and these aren't the wobbly, hand-pulled traction trebuchets of the past. Rising above the sea of tents like vengeful skeletons are the massive counterweight trebuchets you saw being born in the last section. The Europeans on the wall next to you are terrified, and they should be. You watch as the Mamluk engineers make their final adjustments. There is a terrifying professionalism to it. These aren't screaming barbarians rushing the gates. They are unionized demolition experts clocking in for a shift. One machine in particular catches your eye. It is so large, it has its own name, recorded in history as the Furious or Algedban. You watch the massive counterweight box, filled with tons of lead and scrap iron, slowly winch upward. The sound of the ratchet mechanism, a rhythmic clack-clack-clack, drifts across the no man's land. It's the ticking of a doomsday clock. Then, silence. A shout, and the release. The arm of Algedban swings up with a groan that you feel in your teeth. A stone the size of a beer keg arcs into the sky. It doesn't wobble, it doesn't tumble. It spins with a deadly gyroscopic stability. You instinctively duck behind the crenellations, covering your head. Crash! The impact shakes the mortar loose from the stones around you. This isn't just chipping the paint, it's structural damage. The stone smashes through the roof of a tower, pulping anyone unfortunate enough to be standing on the second floor. And before the dust settles, another rock lands, and another. The Mamluks have set up a battery. They are firing in shifts to ensure a continuous rain of granite. This is the moment the West truly wakes up to the reality of the engineering gap. For years, the Crusaders thought their stone castles were invincible. They believed that thick walls and faith were enough. But you are watching physics dismantle faith one stone at a time. The Mamluks have done the math. They know exactly how much force is needed to shatter Frankish masonry. But it's not just rocks. Remember the naphtha. It's back, and it's had an upgrade. You watch a smaller, faster machine, probably a hybrid trebuchet launch, a ceramic pot. It smashes against the wooden gatehouse. The liquid inside ignites instantly. But this isn't just burning oil. The defenders around you scream Greek fire, though technically the true Byzantine formula was likely lost or altered by now. Whatever it is, it burns with a ferocity that defies water. You see men trying to smother it with sand and vinegar. The only things known to work, but the flames are tenacious. They crawl up the wood like living things. Here is a quirky, slightly horrifying tidbit about this siege. The psychological warfare was as heavy as the stones. The Mamluks didn't just throw rocks. They threw pottery filled with venomous snakes and scorpions. Imagine trying to fight a fire while a pissed-off viper is slithering up your leg. It's a level of creative malice that you almost have to respect. It turns the orderly environment of the castle into a chaotic zoo of pain. But amidst the terror, something else is happening. You look to your left and see a Crusader engineer sketching furiously on a scrap of parchment. He isn't praying, he's copying. This is the irony of the Crusades. It was the most violent educational exchange program in history. The Europeans are seeing these massive counterweight engines and realizing we need to build these. They are observing the longer slings, the heavier counterweights, the trigger mechanisms. The survival instinct is driving a rapid technology transfer. If they survive this siege, spoiler, most won't. They will take these designs back to Europe. Historians still argue fiercely about the direction of this technology transfer. It's known as the trebuchet debate. Did the Crusaders bring the counterweight design to the East, or did they learn it from the Muslims and Chinese? For a long time, European historians claimed the Crusaders invented it. But recent analysis of Arabic manuscripts suggests the flow was largely east to west. What you are witnessing on the walls of Acre is likely the moment the students Europeans realized the teachers Mamluks were grading on a curve. Their S, a specific detail in the mechanism that the sketching engineer is focusing on, the hinged counterweight. On the simpler machines, the box of weights was fixed to the beam, but on these Mamluk monsters, the box hangs on a hinge. Why does that matter? As you watch Algabon fire again, you notice the box swings freely as the beam rotates. This keeps the weight falling straight down for longer, rather than swinging in an arc. It's a brilliant efficiency hack that extracts more energy from gravity. The Crusader engineer's eyes go wide. He just figured it out. It's the difference between a slap and a punch. As the sun begins to set, the bombardment doesn't stop. The Mamluks have shifts of crews. They light bonfires to see their targets. The night sky is crisscrossed with burning pots and flying boulders. The sound is a relentless industrial rhythm. You realize that the walls of Acre are doomed. The age of static defense is ending. If you can build a machine that throws a rock heavier than the wall can withstand, hiding behind a wall is no longer a strategy, it's a trap. This realization will travel back to Europe with the fleeing ships. It will land in the courts of France and England, and eventually it will filter down into the notebooks of curious artists who dream of machines that can break cities. But to get from the bloody walls of Acre to the notebook of Leonardo, the knowledge needs a vessel. It needs to survive the chaos of the collapsing Crusader states. It needs to be hidden, smuggled, and translated. So, as the gatehouse begins to splinter under the relentless pounding, we are going to slip away. We're going to follow that engineer with the parchment, the one who was sketching while everyone else was screaming. We're going to see where he hides that dangerous piece of paper. Leave the smoking ruins of Acre behind. Wash the soot from your face and step out of the blinding Mediterranean sun. We are moving geographically and atmospherically. The air drops about 40 degrees, and the bright blue sky is replaced by the low, oppressive gray ceiling of a European winter. You are now standing in the corner of a scriptorium in a remote monastery, somewhere in the misty hills of northern Italy or perhaps southern France. The year is around 1300. It is quiet, painfully quiet. The only sound is the scratching of a quill on parchment and the chattering of teeth. You wrap your arms around yourself because it is freezing in here. Monks didn't believe in central heating. They believed that suffering brought you closer to God. And right now, the monk sitting at the desk in front of you must be very, very close to the Almighty. His fingers are stained black with gallnut ink and blue with cold. But look closer at what he's doing. Usually, you'd expect a monk to be copying the Gospels, or maybe a nice commentary on St. Augustine. But Brother Thomas, let's call him that, to protect his identity, is doing something that could get him a very stern lecture, if not a charge of heresy. He is hunched over a manuscript that clearly didn't come from the church library. The pages are worn, smelling of cumin and dry desert dust. The script on the original page isn't the blocky Gothic Latin he is used to. It's the flowing, cursive beauty of Arabic. He is translating. You are witnessing the smuggler's phase of the Renaissance. Before the great artists could build their machines, someone had to smuggle the instructions past the border guards of dogma. This manuscript likely traveled a long, dangerous road. Maybe it was looted from a library in Toledo during the Reconquista. Maybe it was bought by a Venetian merchant in Alexandria who thought the diagrams looked useful for business. Or maybe it was carried in the tunic of a fleeing refugee from Acre. However it got here, it's radioactive material. Brother Thomas is nervous. Every time the heavy oak door creaks, he jumps and covers the pages with a sheet of innocuous psalms. Why? Because to the uneducated eye, the Arabic script looks like devil scratches, and the diagrams, they look like magic. Peer over his shoulder, he is staring at a drawing of a complex water-raising machine designed by Al-Jazari. It has gears, cams, and a crank slider mechanism. To a medieval European mind, which is used to simple water wheels, this looks like impossible sorcery. Thomas is struggling to find the Latin words for these parts. There is no Latin word for camshaft yet. He has to invent the vocabulary of engineering as he goes. He scratches out rota dentata toothed wheel and sketches a little arrow. He is bridging to worlds. This scene highlights a massive historical debate that scholars still get into fistfights over metaphorically Tate's called the continuity thesis. The old view was that the Middle Ages were stupid and dark, and then suddenly, poof, the Renaissance happened and everyone was smart. The modern view, the one you are watching right now, is that the Dark Ages were actually a time of intense underground intellectual theft. The Renaissance didn't fall from the sky. It was imported, translated, and plagiarized. You notice something funny about Thomas's work. He's not just translating, he's editing. In the original Arabic text, the introduction gives praise to Allah for the wisdom of mechanics. Thomas conveniently skips that part. He replaces the Islamic invocation with a generic Christian prayer. He is baptizing the machine. By the time he's done, this won't be a Muslim water pump. It will be a good, honest, Christian water pump. It's a quirk of history. The machines were accepted, but the authors were often erased. But it's not just water pumps. Flip the page of the stolen manuscript. There it is, the war machines. Detailed diagrams of the counterweight trebuchets you just saw smashing Acre. Thomas traces the lines of the hinge mechanism. He doesn't fully understand the matha algebra, another Arabic word. Algebra is over his head, but he understands the geometry. He copies the triangles, he copies the ratios. This document is a technological seed. Once Thomas finishes this copy, it won't stay in this monastery. It will be sold or traded. It will end up in the private library of a duke or a condottiero, a mercenary captain. It will act as a silent tutor to the generation of engineers who are about to be born. There is a fringe theory, whispered in some academic corners, that some of these smuggled texts contain things even weirder than catapults. Some speculate that early descriptions of gunpowder recipes, which originated in China and passed through the Arab world, were disguised in these monasteries as alchemical recipes or even medical cures to avoid scrutiny. Imagine a monk thinking he's copying a cure for gout, but he's actually writing down how to make a bomb. As you watch Thomas work, you realize the immense precariousness of this moment. If he spills his ink, if a candle falls, if the abbot decides to burn heathen books, the link is broken. The knowledge of the crankshaft or the reciprocating piston could be lost for another 200 years, but he doesn't spill the ink. He finishes the page, blows on it to dry, and slips it between the covers of a heavy leather Bible. This is the ultimate smuggling operation. The secrets of the East are hiding inside the holy books of the West. The atmosphere in the room changes. The bell rings for Vespers. Thomas quickly hides his tools. He looks like a schoolboy who was just reading a comic book in class. He extinguishes the candle, plunging the room into darkness. You follow him out into the cloister, the cold air biting at your face. You are leaving the age of anonymous monks and entering the age of named engineers. The manuscript Thomas just copied is about to leave the monastery. It's going to travel down the mountain into the bustling, dirty, money-obsessed cities of Italy. It's going to fall into the hands of men who don't care about theology, men who don't care about the soul, men who only care about one thing. Does it work? These men are the Italian precursors. They are the forgotten grandfathers of Leonardo da Vinci. They are the ones who will take these 2D drawings and try to build them in 3D. And, as we shall see, they are going to make some spectacular mistakes along the way. But the link is secure. The baton has been passed. The Persian catapult has survived the desert, the libraries of Baghdad, the siege of Acre, and the cold scriptorium. Now, it's going to get a Renaissance makeover. Walk away from the silent, freezing monastery and descend the mountain. As you lose altitude, the air gets warmer, thicker, and significantly louder. You are leaving the hushed world of preservation and entering the noisy, chaotic, money-driven world of application. You are stepping into the streets of Siena in the early 15th century. It's a sensory assault. The smell of incense and old parchment is gone, replaced by the stench of tanning leather, the metallic temps of blood from the butcher shops, and the acrid smoke of blacksmiths. You dodge a cart carrying wine barrels and nearly trip over a stray goat. This is the early Renaissance. We tend to think of this era as a time of painters and sculptors, of guys in tights staring at marble statues. But the real engine of this era wasn't art, it was engineering. You are here to meet the missing links. These are the men history forgot, the guys who did the homework so Leonardo da Vinci could get the AI duck into a cluttered workshop near the city center. It's dusty and filled with wooden models of cranes, pumps, and gears. Sitting at a desk, surrounded by half-finished sketches that look like the doodles of a madman, is a man named Mariano di Jacopo. But his friends call him Ticola the Jackdaw. Ticola is the eccentric uncle of Renaissance engineering. He isn't a polished courtier, he's a notary by trade and a tinkerer by obsession. You look over his shoulder at his notebook, which he calls Dienganese. If you expected the beautiful, anatomical precision of Leonardo, you're in for a shock. Ticola's drawings are, well, let's be charitable and say expressive. His perspective is wonky, his figures look like stickmen who skipped leg day, and his machines float in a void without ground lines. But look past the bad art. Look at the machines. You see a drawing of a trebuchet. It's not the standard counterweight trebuchet you saw at Acre. Ticola has modified it. He's added a complex system of winches and gears to pull the beam down. He is trying to mechanize the reload process. He is taking the brute force of the Sassanid design and trying to apply the delicate mechanics of the Banu Musa clockwork to it. It's a mashup of brute force and precision, a Frankenmachine that shows the East-West synthesis happening in real time. Ticola is a sponge. He has clearly seen the translations of Arabic texts. He draws siphons that are carbon copies of Al-Jazari's designs. He sketches nautical devices that look suspiciously like the bladder-breathing apparatuses suggested by ancient military manuals. But he's adding a distinctly Italian flavor. He wants to know how to use these things to defend Siena. Here is a quirky tidbit about Ticola that you have to love. He was obsessed with cats and dogs, not just as pets, but as engines. In one of his more bizarre sketches, he draws a harbor defense system that involves a dog running inside a hamster wheel to winch up a chain that blocks enemy ships. It's ridiculous. It probably never worked, but it shows his mindset. Energy is energy. Whether it comes from a falling rock, a river, or a golden retriever, I can use it. But Ticola is just the first stop. Leave his dusty shop and travel a few decades forward and a few miles north to meet the man who really polished the lens. Francesco di Giorgio Martini. If Ticola was the eccentric amateur, Francesco is the professional. He is an architect, a painter, a sculptor, and a military engineer. He is the guy Leonardo da Vinci actually wanted to be. You stand in Francesco's studio, and the vibe is different. The drawings here are beautiful. They have depth, shading, and realistic proportions. Francesco is working on a treatise called Trattato di Architectura Ingegneria e Arte Militare. It's a mouthful, but it's basically the Bible of machines. You watch him sketch a Bombarda primitive cannon. But he's not just drawing a tube. He's drawing the carriage, the wheels, the screwjack mechanism to elevate the barrel. And here is where the Sassanid ghost reappears. Francesco is drawing a ballista, but it uses a torsion spring system that looks almost exactly like the Roman and Persian engines of antiquity. He is reviving the twisted rope physics that the counterweight trebuchet had replaced. Why? Because gunpowder is coming, but it's not reliable yet. These engineers are in a transition zone. They are looking backward to the ancients for reliability, while looking forward to gunpowder for power. Francesco is the crucial bridge. He takes Takalah's rough ideas and the smuggled Arab translations and standardizes them. He creates a visual language for machines. He invents the exploded view drawing, a machine with its parts separated so you can see how it fits together. If you've ever assembled a piece of IKEA furniture, you have Francesco to thank or blame. Now, we have to address the elephant in the room. Or rather, the genius in the room. Historians still argue fiercely about the relationship between Leonardo and these guys. For centuries, the narrative was that Leonardo was a singular genius who pulled inventions out of the ether. But modern scholarship has taken a bit of a sledgehammer to that pedestal. The debate is, was Leonardo an inventor, or was he just a really good illustrator of other people's inventions? As you look at Francesco's drawings, you see things that are shockingly familiar. A parachute, a diving suit, a tank-like vehicle. These are the greatest hits of Leonardo's notebook. Yet here they are, drawn decades before Leonardo sketched them. Does this mean Leonardo was a fraud? No. It means he was a student. You are witnessing the existence of a pattern book culture. In this era, engineers didn't have patent laws. They had notebooks. They would copy each other's work as a way of learning. It wasn't considered plagiarism. It was considered state-of-the-art. If you wanted to be a military engineer, you had to copy Francesco's designs, just like a musician has to learn their scales. But there is a physical smoking gun that ties this all together. If you could fast forward to the library of Leonardo da Vinci, which we will do later, but let's sneak a peek now, you would find a copy of Francesco di Giorgio Martini's treatise, and in the margins of that book, in distinct mirror-writing script, are notes. Leonardo owned Francesco's book. He studied it, he critiqued it, he improved it. So, when you see Leonardo's famous war machines, you aren't looking at a spontaneous burst of creativity. You are looking at the final link in a chain. The Sassanid engineer at Dere Arapos built the prototype. The Arab scholars at the House of Wisdom did the math. The monk in the scriptorium saved the file. Takola drew the rough draft. Francesco cleaned up the lines. And Leonardo is about to take that legacy and turn it into art. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Right now, in the late 1400s, these machines are still clunky. They are made of heavy timber and wrought iron. They squeak and break. They are practical, ugly, and dangerous. You watch Francesco supervise the construction of a hoist. It snaps a cable, sending a block of stone crashing down, nearly crushing a workman. Francesco curses in colorful Tuscan dialect. This is the reality of the Italian precursors. They are working in the dirt, dealing with materials that aren't quite strong enough for their ideas. They are dreaming of titanium, but building with oak. As you walk out of Francesco's studio and into the bright Italian sunlight, you feel a shift in the wind. The medieval period is dead. The ancient knowledge has been successfully unzipped and installed on the hard drive of Italian culture. The stage is set, and somewhere in a small village called Vinci, a young boy is about to be born who will take all this grimy industrial machinery and make it beautiful. He won't just draw a machine, he will draw the soul of the machine. But to understand him, we have to go to where he started. We have to leave the professional studios of the engineers and go to the vibrant, artistic, and slightly cutthroat streets of Florence. Get your walking shoes on. We're going to the city of the Medici. Wipe the dust of the Siena workshops off your boots and step into the sunlight of the Arno Valley. You are now walking the cobblestones of Florence in the late 1460s. If Baghdad was the library of the world and the Sassanid desert was the testing ground, then Florence is the showroom. You are standing in the middle of a city that feels like it drank 5 espressos before waking up. The energy is frantic. Money is changing hands, wool is being dyed, and the air smells of a confusing mix of roasting meat, horse manure, and the sharp, acidic temps of urine used in the tanneries. Forget the quiet museum vibe you get when you visit Italy today. This is the Silicon Valley of the 15th century, but with more stabbing and better fashion. As you navigate the crowd, you notice the skyline is dominated by a massive terracotta-tiled beast, the dome of the Cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore. Shutterstock, take a good look at that dome. It is the most important machine in the city. It was engineered by Filippo Brunelleschi, a man who, a few decades prior, had to invent entirely new hoisting machines just to get the bricks up there. The cranes, the reversible gears, the clutch mechanisms, these massive wooden engines are still legendary in the city. They are the backdrop of daily life. And walking beneath that shadow is a teenager who is staring at them a little too intensely. You spot him near the market stalls. He doesn't look like the Leonardo da Vinci you know from the self-portrait The Old Sage, with the Gandalf beard and the heavy brow. This is Leonardo, the youth. He is about 17 or 18 years old, and frankly, he is annoying the hell out of the local merchants. His strikingly handsome historical accounts go out of their way to mention his physical beauty, and strengthened he is dressed like a dandy. He's wearing a short tunic in rose pink, a bold choice, with carefully hose-clad legs. He looks less like a tortured artist, and more like an influencer. But watch what he's doing. He's standing in front of a bird seller's cage. The vendor thinks he's about to make a sale. Leonardo pays for a caged finch, takes it in his large, strong hands, and lets it go. He watches the bird explode upward into the sky. But he's not just doing this because he's a nice guy, though he was famously a vegetarian and loved animals. Look at his eyes. He isn't looking at the bird's freedom. He's looking at the bird's mechanics. He's watching the angle of the wing, the spread of the primary feathers, the way the tail acts as a rudder. He is reversing the flight in reality. This brings us to a crucial reality check about Leonardo's education, or rather, his lack of one. Leonardo is an illegitimate child. His father, Signor Piero, is a notary, a serious legal profession. If Leonardo had been legitimate, he would have been sent to university. He would have been forced to study law, learn fluent Latin and Greek, and spend his life arguing over property contracts. He would have become a boring, wealthy bureaucrat. But because he was born out of wedlock, the university doors were locked. He describes himself later as an uomo senza lettura man, without letters. This sounds like an insult, but it's actually his superpower. Because he couldn't bury his nose in the dusty Latin texts of the ancients, at least. Not easily, and not yet, he was forced to read the Book of Nature. He didn't learn about leverage from Aristotle. He learned it from watching cranes lift stone. He didn't learn about anatomy from Galen. He learned it by poking things. As you follow him through the streets, you realize he is distracted by everything. He stops to look at a swirl of water in the gutter. He stares at the muscle movement of a horse pulling a cart. He is possessed by a ferocious, unorganized curiosity. Historians still argue about whether this distraction was a feature or a bug. Was Leonardo the universal genius who saw the connection between everything? Or was he the great procrastinator, a man with ADHD who could unfinish a painting to save his life because he got distracted by the physics of the drying paint? The answer is probably yes. You watch him pull a small notebook from his belt. It's tiny, expensive paper. He makes a quick sketch. It's not a beautiful portrait. It's a diagram of a gear he just saw on a wool winding machine. This is the connection point. You are watching the moment where the Persian catapult meets the Florentine artist. The city is full of machines. The textile industry here is huge and mechanized. There are water mills driving fulling hammers along the river. There are clockwork mechanisms in the towers. Leonardo is soaking this all up. He is building a mental library of component screws, levers, pulleys, inclined planes. But he needs a place to focus this energy. He needs a teacher who speaks his language. Leonardo turns a corner, heading toward the artistic district. He is on his way to his job. His father, recognizing the boy had talent and probably wanting to get him out of the house, pulled some strings and got him an apprenticeship with one of the most prestigious workshops in Florence. You follow him to a large, unassuming wooden door. The smell of linseed oil, turpentine, and metallic dust wafts out. This is the studio of Andrea del Verrocchio. Now, when we say art studio, don't picture a quiet room with a few easels. Picture a factory. Verrocchio isn't just a painter, he's a contractor. His shop produces statues, paintings, armor, bells, death masks, and even parade floats for the Medici festivals. It is a place where art and engineering are smashed together. As Leonardo puts his hand on the latch, you realize that this is where the magic happens. Inside these walls, he won't just learn how to mix colors, he will learn how to cast bronze cannons. He will learn how to move heavy statues. He will learn the geometry of perspective. He is about to walk into the best engineering school in Europe, disguised as an art class. And waiting for him inside are the tools that will allow him to finally decode those smuggled manuscripts we saw earlier. The man without letters is about to become the man with the machines. But he's going to have to scrub a lot of floors and grind a lot of pigment first. Push open the heavy oak door and step into the controlled chaos of the bottega. If you thought the streets of Florence were loud, you haven't heard anything yet. You are standing in the workshop of Andrea del Veracoi, and the first thing that hits you is the smell. It's a heady, toxic cocktail of linseed oil, stale urine used for mixing paints and treating metal, charcoal dust, and the metallic temps of bronze filing. This isn't a quiet studio where a lonely artist dabs at a canvas. This is a factory floor. This is industrial light and magic before electricity. You navigate through a maze of half-finished projects. To your left, a young Sandro Botticelli is arguing with a drapery model. To your right, Pietro Perugino is grinding lapis lazuli into a fine blue paste. And in the center of it all, commanding the room like a general, is Veracchio. He's covered in plaster dust, shouting instructions to a team of smiths who are hammering out a suit of armor. But you're here for the handsome teenager in the corner. Leonardo is currently doing the grunt work. He's sweeping the floor or preparing a wooden panel with layer after layer of gesso. It's boring, repetitive work, but watch his eyes. He's not looking at the broom. He's looking at the hoist in the ceiling. The workshop is filled with heavy objects, marble slabs, bronze casts, massive timber frames. You can't move these things with artistic sensitivity. You move them with physics. Veracchio has rigged the studio with a system of pulleys, levers, and winches to shift the inventory. Every time a block of marble needs to be moved, Leonardo watches the ropes tighten. He watches the gears bite. He hears the groan of the axle. He is learning that if you arrange the wheels correctly, a boy can lift a giant. This is the hidden curriculum of the Renaissance. We obsess over the brushstrokes, but the real education was in the hardware. To be a master artist, you had to be a master mechanic. You had to know how to build the scaffolding to paint the fresco. You had to know the chemistry of the alloys to cast the statue. You had to know the geometry of the lenses to understand light. And right now, the workshop is buzzing with the biggest engineering contract in the city, the copper ball. The cathedral authorities have commissioned Veracchio to cast a massive, gilded copper sphere to tons of metal to be placed on top of the lantern of Brunelleschi's dome. It is the cherry on top of the architectural sundae. But there is a problem. The lantern is over 300 feet in the air. How do you get a Teutonball up there without dropping it through the roof of the church and killing the bishop? You watch as Veracchio unfolds the plans. They aren't inventing a new machine from scratch. They are dusting off the blueprints of Filippo Brunelleschi, the genius who built the dome decades earlier. Leonardo crowds in to see. He is staring at diagrams of a reversible hoista crane that can switch directions without unhitching the oxen. He sees the screw jacks and the counterweights. Suddenly, the Sassanid connection snaps into focus. Remember the traction trebuchet. Remember the counterweight engine at Acre. The physics are identical. A crane is just a catapult in slow motion. A catapult uses a counterweight to throw a stone up and out. A crane uses a counterweight to lift a stone up and in. The mathematics of the lever, the ratio of the pulley wheels, the stress on the rope bit is the exact same science. Leonardo is soaking this up. He is realizing that the machines of creation and the machines of destruction are siblings. You follow Leonardo as he grabs a piece of silver point paper. He starts sketching the crane designs. These drawings still exist today. For a long time, historians thought Leonardo invented these machines because they were in his notebook. But the scholarly debate here is now settled. He was drawing what he saw. He was a reporter documenting the tech of his time. He was drawing Brunelleschi's machines, learning their secrets by tracing their lines. There is a quirky, almost sitcom dynamic in the shop that you have to appreciate. Legend has it that Veracchio eventually gave up painting because his student got too good. The story goes that they were working on the baptism of Christ, and Leonardo painted an angel so ethereal and perfect that Verrocchio looked at his own clunky brushwork, put down his palette, and said, "I'm done. I'm sticking to sculpture." Whether that's true or just Vasari's gossip, the vibe is clear. Verrocchio is the master of heavy industry, but Leonardo is the master of nature. But Leonardo isn't just learning how to lift things, he's learning how things break. Walk over to the casting pit. They are preparing a mold for a bronze cannon side hustle for the workshop, because Renaissance warlords always needed more guns. You watch Leonardo staring at the molten bronze. He's fascinated by the fluid dynamics. He watches how it pours, how it cools, how it shrinks. He asks the foundrymen about the burst strength. He learns that if the casting has a tiny air bubble, the cannon will explode and kill the crew. He learns that the thickness of the barrel has to follow a specific ratio to the weight of the ball. This is his introduction to ballistics. He is learning that war is not just about courage, it's about metallurgy. It's in this sweaty, noisy workshop that the pieces of the puzzle start to click together for him. The ancient texts speak of engines. The crane is an engine. The cannon is an engine. The bird he released in the market is an engine made of bone and feathers. He starts to see the world as a collection of mechanisms. One afternoon, you catch him slacking off again. He's sitting on a pile of lumber, sketching. But he's not drawing a Madonna, he's drawing a gear train. He's trying to figure out how to make the motion smoother. He draws a spiral gyroworm drive. He remembers the Archimedes screws used in water pumps. He wonders, could I use this gear to wind a crossbow? Could I use it to pull a trebuchet arm? He is remixing the technology. He is taking the peaceful machines of the construction site and mentally rearming them. This is the incubation period. Leonardo is gathering the raw data. He's learning the limits of wood, the strength of iron, and the friction of rope. He is building the database that he will later access when he sits down to design his tanks and flying machines, but he's getting restless. You can see it in his posture. He's tired of painting angels. He's tired of the smell of turpentine. He wants to do something bigger. He looks out the window at the Palazzo Vecchio, the seat of government. He knows that the real money and the real creative freedom isn't in painting altarpieces for churches. It's in working for a prince. And princes don't need angels, they need weapons. Leonardo knows that to get the attention of the big players, the dukes of Milan, the kings of France, he needs to market himself not as an artist, but as a military engineer. He needs to prove that he can build the machines that win wars. So, as the sun sets over the Arno and the workshop finally quiets down, you watch Leonardo pack up his things. He slips that sketchbook into his tunic, the one full of cranes and gears. He is about to make a bold career pivot. He is about to write the most famous resume in history. He is leaving the world of art to enter the world of war. And he's going to use every trick he learned from Verrocchio's cranes to do it. Leave the smell of turpentine and the dusty streets of Florence behind. We are jumping forward to roughly 1482. You are standing in a quiet room, perhaps a rented study, looking over the shoulder of a man who has decided he is too good for the local market. Leonardo is 30 years old now. By Renaissance standards, he's dangerously close to being a late bloomer. He has talent, sure, but he has a reputation for not finishing things. In Florence, he's known as the guy who sketches amazing ideas and then wanders off to follow a butterfly. He needs a fresh start. He needs a patron with deep pockets and a lot of enemies. He needs Ludovico Sforza, the Duke of Milan. So he is doing what every job seeker in history has done. He is writing a cover letter. But this isn't just any letter. This is widely considered the most audacious job application ever written. You watch the quill dance across the paper. The handwriting is confident, though he's writing left to right this time, using a scribe or trying to be legible for the Duke, listing his skills in numbered bullet points. If you expect him to say, "I am the greatest painter in the world," prepare to be shocked. Item 1. I have a sort of extremely light and strong bridges, adapted to be most easily carried, and with them you may pursue, and at any time flee from the enemy. Item 2. I know how, when a place is besieged, to take the water out of the trenches, and make endless variety of bridges and covered ways and ladders. Item 3. If by reason of the height of the banks, or the strength of the place and its position, it is impossible when besieging a place to avail oneself of the plan of bombardment, I have methods for destroying every rock or other fortress, even if it were founded on a rock, etc. You keep reading. Item 4 is about mortar. Item 5 is about mining under walls. Item 9 is about building ships that are proof against fire. It goes on and on. He is pitching himself as the ultimate warmonger. He is promising the Duke of Milan, man whose power rests entirely on military force, that he can deliver the Sassanid dream, total destruction of the enemy. It is only at the very end, almost as a throwaway PS, that he adds Item 10. In time of peace, I believe I can give perfect satisfaction and to the equal of any other in architecture and the composition of buildings. Also, in painting, I can do as much as anyone else, be he who he may. Also, I can paint. Imagine Michelangelo writing that. It's absurd, but look closer at the list. Do you recognize the DNA? Taking water out of trenches. That's the Banu Musa and Al-Jazari water pumps. Destroying every rock, that's the math of the counterweight trebuchet. Proof against fire. That's a direct response to the naphtha pots. Leonardo is aggregating the entire history of military engineering. We've just walked through and presenting it as his own proprietary software suite. Here is a reality check that feels a bit like a cold shower. Leonardo had built almost none of these things. He had never built a portable bridge. He had never drained a fortress trench. He had never cast a giant mortar. He was, to put it bluntly, bluffing. Or, if you want to be generous, he was projecting his potential. He knew the theory. He had seen the cranes in Veracaz's workshop. He had studied the drawings of Toccola and Francesco di Giorgio Martini. In his mind, the jump from drawing a gear to building a tank was just a matter of logistics. Historians still argue about the ethics of this letter. Was Leonardo a con artist? Or did he truly believe in his own universal genius? Most scholars lean toward the latter. To Leonardo, the boundary between I have drawn it and I have built it was blurry. In his mind, if the physics worked on paper, the machine already existed. He was selling the concept of himself as an engineer. But why Milan? Why leave the artistic center of the world for a city that the Florentines considered a foggy military camp full of armorsmiths? Because Milan was where the metal was. Milan was the armory of Italy. While Florence was busy debating Neoplatonic philosophy and the nature of the soul, Milan was busy mass-producing plate armor and cannons. If you wanted to build the big machines, the ones that required tons of iron and bronze, you went to Milan. It was the Detroit of the 15th century. As you watch him seal the letter with wax, you realize the brilliance of his strategy. He knows his audience. Ludovico Sforza, known as Il Moro the Moor, is a usurper. He seized power and is terrified of losing it. He doesn't need a Last Supper, though he'll get one eventually. He needs a guarantee that when the French or the Venetians come knocking, his walls will hold. Leonardo is offering him security. There is a quirky detail about this moment. When Leonardo finally packs his bags for Milan, he doesn't bring a portfolio of paintings. He brings a musical instrument. He was a virtuoso on the lira da broccio, a bowed string instrument. Historical accounts say he brought a silver lyre shaped like a horse, skull something he designed and built himself. So, when he actually meets the Duke, he likely charms him not with engineering diagrams first, but with a song. He's the ultimate Renaissance multi-hyphenate engineer-painter-musician bluffer. But the letter works. Ludovico hires him, and just like that, the man without letters is given the keys to the kingdom. He is given a workshop in the Court Vecchia. He is given a salary, though the Duke was notoriously slow at paying it. And most importantly, he is given access. Access to what? To the library. You see, Milan wasn't just a factory. It was a crossroads. It had connections to the Holy Roman Empire to the north and the trade routes to the east. The ducal library in the Castello Sforzesco was filled with manuscripts that Florence didn't have. It held translations of medical texts, mathematical treatises, and yes, the dusty, forgotten manuals of the ancient engineers. As Leonardo steps into the carriage that will take him north, leaving the Tuscan hills for the flat, foggy plains of Lombardy, he is also stepping into his destiny. He has promised the Duke that he can build covered chariots, safe and unattackable tanks. He has promised machines of marvelous efficacy. Now he actually has to figure out how to build them. You can almost feel the panic setting in as the carriage bumps along the road. It's one thing to tell a Duke you can divert a river. It's another thing to stand in the mud with a shovel. Leonardo is going to spend the next 17 years in Milan, frantically trying to live up to the promises in that letter. He will fill thousands of pages of notebooks. He will dissect corpses to understand the levers of the human body. He will study the flight of birds to build air support. And he will dig deep into the past. He knows he can't invent all this from scratch. He needs help. He needs the ghosts of the Sassanids, the Greeks, and the Arabs. So, buckle up. We are going to Milan. We are going to slip into the Duke's library with Leonardo and watch as he pulls a specific book off the shelf, a book that will unlock the secrets of the automated machine. The bluff is over. The research begins. Step out of the noisy courtyards of the Castello Sforzesco, where the Duke's soldiers are drilling with pikes, and slip into the cool, stone-walled silence of the ducal library. The air here is different. It smells of expensive beeswax candles, dried lavender to keep the bookworms away, and the musty, sweet scent of decaying vellum. You are standing in one of the most exclusive, restricted sections in Europe. Leonardo is here, and he is hunting. He isn't looking for poetry or theology. He is ignoring the illuminated Bibles that the Duke spent a fortune on. He is scanning the shelves for the dirty books, the ones with grease stains on the covers, the practical manuals, the scientific treatises. He is looking for the engineering heritage that we've been tracking from the desert of Syria, and he finds it. Watch as he pulls a heavy volume from a shelf. It might be a Latin translation of a Greek text, or perhaps a rare manuscript copied from the Arabic scholars of Spain. As he opens it, you see the pages are filled not with angels, but with gears. You are looking at the intellectual DNA of the Book of Knowledge of Ingenious Mechanical Devices by Al-Jazari, the master engineer we met back in the House of Wisdom. Whether Leonardo is holding a direct translation or a derivative work by an Italian copyist like Ticola doesn't matter. The diagrams are unmistakable. Look at the page Leonardo is studying. It shows a water clock, but it's not just a clock. It's a complex system of floats, valves, and pulleys. It features a camshafter rod with eccentric lobes that converts rotational motion into linear motion. This is the secret sauce of automation. Al-Jazari used it to make mechanical musicians play drums. Leonardo stares at this. He traces the line of the cam with his finger. In his mind, the little mechanical drummer disappears. He doesn't want to make a toy. He wants to make a machine that hammers iron. He wants to make a machine that saws wood. He realizes that the cam is the universal translator of motion. It can turn the turning of a water wheel into the pounding of a forge hammer. This moment in the library is the big bang of Leonardo's mechanical universe. He is realizing that machines can be programmed. There is a scholarly debate that rages around this specific moment. Historians often argue, could Leonardo read Arabic? The consensus is almost certainly no. He struggled enough with Latin, but here is the counter-argument. He didn't need to. Engineering is a visual language. A gear is a gear in any language. A lever works the same way in Baghdad as it does in Milan. Leonardo, being the supreme visual learner, could read the mechanics of an Al-Jazari diagram without understanding a single word of the text. He was decoding the physics directly from the drawing. As he flips the pages, he finds something that sparks a specific, eccentric obsession: the automaton. The Arabs were famous for building elaborate mechanical toys to delight the caliph's elephants that moved, birds that chirped, servants that poured drinks. To most Europeans, these were just magic tricks. But Leonardo sees the anatomy. He sees the cables acting like tendons. He sees the gears acting like joints. And right here, in this library, the idea for the robotic knight is born. You might have seen sketches of this in documentaries. It's a suit of German-style plate armor filled with gears and cables, designed to sit up, wave its arms, and move its head. It is the first humanoid robot in Western history, and it is directly descended from the musical automata of the East. Leonardo isn't inventing the concept of the robot, he is militarizing it. He is taking the whimsical technology of the court of Baghdad and dressing it in the armor of a Milanese mercenary. There is a quirky, slightly creepy tidbit about Leonardo's time in this library. He didn't just study machines, he studied jokes. The library contained collections of facetious, witty stories and riddles. Leonardo loved them. He filled his notebooks with them. One of his favorites was about a priest who goes around blessing everyone with holy water. And a painter asks, if I paint a devil and you bless it, will it run away? It shows a playful, skeptical side to his mind. He wasn't a dour academic, he was a guy who liked a good punchline. But the joke he is working on now is on the laws of physics. He moves to another section of the library. he finds a treatise on Archimedes. Now, Archimedes is the god of ancient engineering, the guy who said, "Give me a lever long enough and I will move the world." But Archimedes' true works were largely lost to the West until they were filtered back through Islamic translations. Leonardo finds the description of the Archimedes screw, a spiral tube used to lift water. Watch Leonardo's face. He doesn't just see a water pump, he sees a propeller. He sketches a quick diagram in his notebook. He takes the screw, which is meant to move water up, and he wonders, if I spin this screw fast enough in the air, will it pull itself up? You are witnessing the conception of the aerial screw, the famous helicopter design. It is a direct misapplication of fluid dynamics. He thinks air is just thin water. He thinks if he can screw through water, he can screw through the sky. He is wrong, the physics doesn't work that way. You need an airfoil, not a screw. But it's a brilliant, creative mistake. And it stems directly from his study of these ancient hydraulic texts. The library is also where he finds the perpetual motion diagrams. The medieval world was obsessed with machines that could run forever. Leonardo studies them, analyzes the weights and the wheels, and then does something revolutionary. He writes fake news in the margin, or the Renaissance equivalent. He is one of the first engineers to intuitively grasp the law of conservation of energy. He writes, "Speculators on perpetual motion, how many vain projects of the like character you have created. Go and be the companions of the searchers for gold." He equates free energy with alchemy, a scam. He realizes that you can't get more out of a machine than you put in. This skepticism, honed among these dusty books, sets him apart from the magicians. He is becoming a physicist. But the Duke didn't hire him to debunk magic tricks or build toy knights. The Duke hired him to win wars. Leonardo closes the book on automata. He pulls down another scroll. This one details the trajectories of projectiles. It discusses the impetus, the force that keeps a stone moving. He looks at the diagrams of the Sassanid traction trebuchets and the heavy counterweight engines. He realizes that the old wooden drope technology has hit a ceiling. You can only build a trebuchet so big before it snaps. You can only twist a rope so tight if he wants to fulfill the promises in his cover letter, the unattackable chariots. The endless Brigici needs to upgrade the materials. He needs to stop thinking in wood and start thinking in iron. He looks at a diagram of a Persian mangonella stone thrower. He dips his quill and starts to redraw it, but he changes the arm. He replaces the solid timber beam with a laminated, flexible bow. He replaces the rope springs with metal leaf springs. He is redesigning the ancient catapult to work like a giant metallic crossbow. This is the moment of synthesis. The library has given him the history. The workshop has given him the materials. Now his imagination is going to weld them together. As the candle flickers low and the librarian, who is probably tired of this weird Italian guy staying past closing time, starts to cough meaningfully. Leonardo makes one last note. He sketches a wheel, but not just a round wheel. He sketches a wheel with knives coming out of it. He has found a reference to the scythed chariots of the ancient Persians' chariots with blades on the wheels to cut down infantry. It's a gruesome, barbaric weapon from the days of Darius. Leonardo smiles. He thinks the Duke will love it. He packs up his things. He has the theory. Now he has to go build the nightmare. Let's pull up a stool next to Leonardo's workbench. It's late, very late. The candles have burned down to nubs, pooling wax onto the scarred oak table. The sounds of the Milanese streets have faded, leaving only the scratching of his pen and the occasional rustle of a page turn. You are watching a master surgeon operating on a patient that has been dead for 1,000 years. On the desk in front of him is a copy of a diagram that traces its lineage back to the Sassanid engineers we met in the desert. It's a standard mangonella torsion catapult. It looks like a big wooden spoon powered by a twisted skein of rope. It's effective, sure, but to Leonardo's eye, it's ugly, it's inefficient. It's a bastard of geometry, as he might say if he'd had a few cups of wine. You watch as he dips his quill in ink and begins to redraw it. He isn't copying it, he is deconstructing it. He looks at the heavy timber throwing arm of the Persian original. He knows that wood is heavy. Heavy means inertia. Inertia means the machine wastes half its energy just trying to get the arm moving before it even thinks about throwing the stone. He sketches a note, make the arm tapered. He realizes that if the arm is thinner at the tip, it will whip faster. This is the same principle as the end of a bullwhip. He is applying aerodynamics to a rock thrower. Then he looks at the power source. The ancient machine uses a bundle of twisted sinew or hair. It's a nightmare to maintain. If it rains, the sinew stretches and the machine loses power. If it's too dry, it becomes brittle and snaps. Leonardo, living in the foggy, damp climate of Milan, knows this is a deal-breaker. You can't tell a duke, "Sorry, Your Highness, we can't bombard the castle today because it's a bit drizzly." So, he proposes a radical upgrade. You see him sketching a series of curved metal plates. He is replacing the organic torsion bundle with a metallurgical solution. This is a massive leap. The Sassanids didn't have spring steel of this quality, but Milan does. Leonardo is designing a catapult that acts like a giant metallic bow. He draws a machine where the energy is stored in the bending of iron, not the twisting of gut. It's a move from biology to industry. He is essentially designing the suspension system of a 19th century carriage and using it to kill people. But look at the base of his drawing. The Persian machines were stationary. They sat on the ground, dug in like ticks. If the enemy moved, you had to disassemble the whole thing to aim it. Leonardo hates static things. He believes motion is the cause of all life. So, he puts wheels on it. But not just cartwheels. He sketches a complex system of worm gears and cranks attached to the axles. He is designing a self-propelled artillery piece. He imagines a crew cranking these handles to reposition the weapon without needing a team of oxen. It's the great-grandfather of the mobile howitzer. Here is a quirky personal detail you might notice as you read over his shoulder. The text accompanying these drawings is weird. It flows from right to left. It's his famous mirror writing. For centuries, people thought this was a code. They thought he was hiding his secrets from the church or rival engineers. It adds a layer of Da Vinci Code mystery to the scene. But the reality check is much more mundane and relatable. Leonardo was left-handed. In the 15th century, writing left-handed with a quill pen was a logistical nightmare. If you wrote left-right, your hand would smear the wet ink you just laid down. By writing right-to-left, he kept his hand clean. It wasn't a conspiracy. It was smudge control. However, hiding the secrets wasn't a bad side effect. He knew that what he was drawing was valuable intellectual property. As he refines the trigger mechanism of the mangonel, he adds a ratchet and pawl. This is a direct lift from the clock mechanisms he studied. The Sassanid machines required men to hold the tension or use a simple pin. Leonardo designs a gear that clicks into place, locking the tension safely. It allows a single man to wind up a weapon that used to require a team. He is automating the violence. But there is a scholarly debate that hovers over this page like a ghost. Did Leonardo understand the mathematics of what he was drawing? Specifically, did he understand Hooke's law, the law of elasticity, that says the force needed to extend a spring is proportional to the distance? Robert Hooke wouldn't be born for another century. Some historians argue that Leonardo was working purely on intuition and visual estimation. He felt the metal would hold. Others point to his geometric diagrams of parabolas and ratios and argue he had a private, non-standardized version of calculus in his head. You watch him draw a triangle to calculate the trajectory. He knows that 45 degrees is the optimal angle for distance. He didn't need the formula, he had the geometry. As the sketch nears completion, the machine on the page looks nothing like the dusty relic from It is sleek, it has elegant curves, it looks like a piece of sculpture. Leonardo has done the impossible. He has made a weapon of siege warfare look aesthetically pleasing. He pauses, rubbing his eyes. He adds a tiny doodle in the margina profile of an old man with a hooked nose, or maybe a flower. His mind wanders for a split second before snapping back to the task. He isn't done with the concept of stored energy yet. He looks at the mangonel he just drew and thinks it's still too small. The leaf springs are clever, but they have a limit. If you bend steel too far, it stays bent. He needs something that can store more energy than steel, more energy than rope. He needs to scale up the bow itself. He turns the page. The scratching of the quill becomes more aggressive. He starts to draw something that looks like the mangonel's big, terrifying brother. He is about to take the concept of the bow and arrow and expand it to a scale that borders on the ridiculous. You lean in closer. What he is drawing now isn't just an improvement on a Persian design. It's a monster that will baffle historians for centuries. He is designing the giant crossbow. And if you think the mangonel was dangerous, wait until you see the size of the bolt this thing is supposed to fire. Turn the page of the notebook. If the redesigned mangonel was a sleek sports car, what you are looking at now is a monster truck the size of a cathedral. You are staring at one of the most famous images in the Codex Atlanticus, the giant crossbow. Take a moment to appreciate the sheer audacity of this drawing. Leonardo has drawn a soldier standing next to the weapon for scale, and the guy looks like an action figure dropped next to a full-size tractor. By estimating the height of the soldier, modern engineers calculate that this bow has a wingspan of roughly 24 meters. That's nearly 80 feet. That is wider than the wingspan of a Boeing 737. Leonardo isn't just designing a weapon here. He is designing a siege engine that doubles as a psychological event. He knows that if you roll a crossbow the size of an airliner up to the enemy gates, they might just surrender out of sheer confusion and terror. But look past the size and focus on the mechanism. This is where the ancient ghosts of the Sassanids and Greeks are hiding. The core concept of bow mounted on a stock traces its lineage back to the Greek gastrophytes, or billy bow, and the Roman ballista. But the ballista relied on torsion-twisted bundles of sinew to generate power. Leonardo, ever the contrarian, has gone back to the idea of flexion. He wants the power to come from the bending of the bow arms themselves. This presents a massive engineering problem. A single piece of wood that is 80 feet long and thick enough to hold that kind of tension would be wildly inefficient. It would be heavy, sluggish, and prone to snapping. It would be like trying to shoot an arrow using a telephone pole. So, look closely at how he draws the arms of the bow. They aren't solid logs, they are laminated. Leonardo has sketched the arms as a series of stacked interlocking sections of wood and perhaps metal bound together with leather straps. This is a technique called lamination, and while it feels modern, it's actually a deep cut from the history of the Asiatic composite bow. The Mongols, the Huns, and yes, the Sassanids all used composite bows made of horn, wood, and sinew glued together. They understood that different materials handle compression and tension differently. Leonardo is taking that ancient handheld technology and scaling it up to an industrial level. He is trying to create a spring that is huge but still flexible. He is essentially designing the leaf springs that will one day hold up Ford Model Ts, but he's using them to throw a stone weighing as much as a Fiat. Now look at the carriage. This is where the Persian connection we saw in the previous section really shines. The giant crossbow is mounted on 6 wheels. But notice the wheels are canted. They are tilted inward at an angle. Why? Because Leonardo, ever the student of physics, knows that this machine is going to be heavy and top-heavy. If it hits a pothole, it tips over. By angling the wheels, he widens the base of support and increases stability. It's a trick used in later centuries for artillery carriages, but here he's figuring it out on the fly. And then there is the trigger mechanism. How do you pull back a bowstring that has thousands of pounds of tension? You certainly don't do it with your fingers. If you look at the back of the stock, you see a complex arrangement of gears, specifically, a worm gear connected to a crank. This is the handshake between east and west. The worm gear, a screw that turns a toothed wheel, was a staple of the Arab engineers like Al-Jazari for water-raising machines. Leonardo has weaponized it. He realizes that a worm gear has a unique property. It doesn't slip back. You can crank it, take your hand off the handle to wipe the sweat from your brow, and the gear holds the tension. It is a self-locking brake. He has replaced the Sassanid crew of 50 sweating men pulling ropes with one guy turning a handle. It is the ultimate efficiency hack. But here's the scholarly debate that makes this drawing so controversial. Did Leonardo actually intend for this thing to be built? Or is it a concept car, a piece of paper architecture designed to show off his understanding of ratios? Many modern engineers argue that the giant crossbow is physically impossible. The square cube law is a harsh mistress. If you double the size of an object, you quadruple its surface area but octuple its volume and mass. A bow of this size, made of the materials available in the 1480s, would likely be so heavy that it couldn't snap back fast enough to throw the projectile. It would be a slow, lumbering flop. The arms might even shatter under their own weight. Some historians suggest Leonardo knew this. They argue that this drawing wasn't a blueprint for the factory floor. It was a conversation piece for the Duke. It was meant to say, "Look, my lord, I understand the principles of scaling better than anyone." It's a flex. It's the Renaissance equivalent of a concept rendering for a colony on Mars School to look at. But we aren't launching next Tuesday. However, there's a counter-argument. Look at the projectile. He hasn't drawn a giant arrow. He isn't trying to spear a giant. He has drawn a stone or a flaming bomb. This suggests he wasn't trying to achieve the high velocity of an arrow. He was trying to achieve the lobbing arc of a trebuchet, but with a flatter trajectory. He wanted to skip stones across a battlefield to smash infantry lines, the bowling ball of death strategy. There's a quirky, almost comical detail in the drawing that many people miss. The soldier standing next to the machine, he looks totally relaxed. He just hanging out next to a device, storing enough potential energy to flatten him into a paste if a gear slips. It highlights the disconnect between the pristine world of the drawing and the terrifying reality of the machine. In real life, that soldier would be standing 50 feet away, probably behind a tree, praying the lamination glue holds. As you stare at the intricate cross-hatching of the rope in the wood, you realize that Leonardo is wrestling with the limits of his era. He has the mind of the 19th century, understanding automation, gearing, and interchangeable parts. But he is stuck with the materials of the 15th century. He wants titanium and carbon fiber. He has oak and leather. This tension between the idea and the realities, the defining struggle of his life. He is constantly designing machines that are too advanced for the metallurgy of his time to support. But he doesn't stop at the bow. He looks at the wheels of the carriage again. He remembers the scythed chariots. He remembers the Persian war elephants. He starts to think about protection. The giant crossbow is exposed. The guy cranking the handle is a sitting duck for enemy archers. He wonders, what if I put a roof on it? What if I put walls around it? What if the weapon could move itself, carrying the soldier inside like a beast carrying a parasite? He dips his pen again. He is about to make the leap from mobile artillery to armored vehicle. He is about to reinvent the turtle. The transition from the giant crossbow to the armored car is seamless in his mind. Both are about projecting power while minimizing human effort. But the armored car is going to tap into a different kind of ancient fear. It's not just about size. It's about the unstoppable, creeping inevitability of a machine that cannot be hurt. So, let's leave the giant bow on the drafting table. It's too big to build anyway. Let's look at the smaller, stranger, and infinitely more claustrophobic design that sits a few pages away. Get ready to climb inside a wooden tortoise, duck your head, and squeeze through the narrow hatch. We are leaving the open air of the giant crossbow's firing range and entering one of the most claustrophobic spaces in the history of military design. You are now sitting inside the belly of Leonardo's covered chariot, what the modern world calls his tank. It's dark in here. The only light comes from the narrow gun slits spaced around the perimeter. The air is stagnant, smelling of sawdust, unwashed bodies, and the metallic temps of gunpowder. You are sharing this cramped wooden yurt with 8 other men. They aren't soldiers, they are the engine. Take a look at the structure around you. It doesn't look like a modern tank with treads. It looks like a giant conical tortoise shell made of reinforced wood and strengthened with metal plates. The shape is brilliant. Leonardo, ever the observer of nature, realized that a slanted surface deflects blows better than a flat one. If a cannonball hits this sloped roof, it glances off rather than smashing through. It is the ancestor of the sloped armor you see on modern main battle tanks. But why did he design this? What was the inspiration for a moving fortress that breaks enemy lines? To answer that, we have to look back to the Sassanids again. We have to look at the beasts of the East. The Persian Empire was famous for its heavy cavalry, but its ultimate weapon was the war elephant. When the Romans or the Arabs faced the Sassanids, they weren't just fighting men, they were fighting biology. A war elephant was a living tank. It was armored with chainmail or leather. It carried a Torah hood in its back, filled with archers and javelin throwers. It could trample infantry, terrify horses, and act as a mobile firing platform. Leonardo, reading the ancient histories in the Sforza library, would have been fascinated by the concept of the elephant, but repulsed by the reality of it. Elephants are smart, emotional animals. If they get hurt or panicked, they rampage, often trampling their own troops. They are unpredictable. They eat a fortune in food. They get sick. So, in true Leonardo fashion, he decided to replace the biology with geometry. He wanted the psychological terror of the elephant without the biological drawbacks. He wanted a beast that didn't feel pain and obeyed orders perfectly. He built a mechanical elephant. You look at the legs of this machine, they are 4 heavy iron-rimmed wheels. Connected to these wheels is a complex system of gears and cranks. The 8 men inside aren't there to shoot. They are there to turn the cranks. They are the horsepower. As they heave against the handles, the gears turn, the wheels grind, and the wooden tortoise creeps forward. It is a nightmare of ergonomics. Imagine trying to run a marathon while doing a push-up inside a sauna. The top speed of this vehicle would have been roughly slow walk, but speed wasn't the point. Inevitability was the point. Now look at the weaponry. Arranged in a circle around the waist of the tank are cannon-slight bombard weapons. This allowed for a 360-degree fire. Leonardo writes in his proposal, "I will make covered chariots, safe and unattackable, which, entering among the enemy with their artillery, there is no body of men so great, but they would break them. And behind these, infantry could follow quite unhurt and without any hindrance." This is combined arms doctrine, centuries before it had a name. He envisioned this wooden elephant smashing a hole in the enemy lines, just like a real Sassanid elephant, while his own troops marched in its wake. But as you sit there, watching the imaginary crew strain against the cranks, you notice something strange about the gears. If you trace the diagram in the codex closely, you'll see a massive problem. The crank system is drawn so that the front wheels rotate in one direction and the rear wheels rotate in the opposite direction. If the crew actually tried to move this thing, the wheels would fight each other, the axles would lock, the wood would splinter, the tank would tear itself apart before it moved an inch. This brings us to one of the most famous debates in Leonardo scholarship, the sabotage theory. Historians and engineers argue fiercely about this. Was this a mistake? Leonardo was human, after all. He was drawing complex 3D gearing on 2D paper by candlelight. Maybe he just had a brain fart. Maybe his dyslexia caused him to flip the gear orientation in his head. Or ... was it on purpose? There is a romantic theory that Leonardo, who described war as pazzia bestialissima, beastly madness, was a pacifist at heart. The theory goes that he deliberately flawed the design so that if the bloodthirsty Duke ever tried to build it, it wouldn't work. He was protecting the world from his own genius. He was the Oppenheimer who gave the bomb the wrong firing code. It's a nice story. It makes him a hero. But the reality check is probably less noble. This was a job application. Remember? He wanted to get hired. It's unlikely you'd sabotage your own portfolio. The more likely explanation is copyright protection. In the Renaissance, intellectual property theft was rampant. If a spy stole Leonardo's notebook, they would build the machine exactly as drawn it. It would fail. Only Leonardo knew the fix. It was a primitive form of DRM, digital rights management. Here is a quirky, claustrophobic tidbit about the tank's interior that usually gets left out. The noise. Leonardo didn't design a suspension system. Those iron-rimmed wheels rolling over rocky Italian fields would have vibrated the entire structure like a drum. Add in the sound of 8 cannons firing inside a wooden echo chamber. The crew wouldn't just be exhausted, they would be deaf. And the smoke, without a ventilation fan, which he didn't include, the black powder smoke would have filled the cabin in seconds. Basically, it was a suicide box. But the Persian connection runs deeper than just the elephant analogy. The Sassanids also used siege tower stall. Leonardo's tank is essentially a siege tower that has been cut in half and given guns. He took the vertical threat of the tower and turned it into a horizontal threat for the battlefield. As you look at the gun ports, you realize that Leonardo was trying to solve the problem of the reload cycle. In ancient warfare, archers on elephants could shoot continuously, but cannons are slow. By putting guns all the way around, he created a ripple fire effect. As the tank spun or moved, a fresh gun could be brought to bear while the others reloaded. It's the same logic as the carousel autoloaders in modern Russian tanks, but powered by sweating Italians. The tank represents the peak of Leonardo's obsession with protection. Most of his other designs are offensive catapults, crossbows. This is defensive. It reflects a shift in warfare where the individual soldier was becoming more valuable, or at least the equipment was. You couldn't afford to lose a trained gunner to a stray arrow. But there is a tragic irony here. The Sassanid elephants eventually became obsolete because the Romans figured out how to spook them. They used fire and noise to make the beasts stampede back into their own lines. Leonardo's mechanical elephant had a similar weakness. Terrain. Italy isn't a flat parking lot. It's full of ditches, mud, and hills. This heavy wooden tortoise, with its thin wheels, would have bogged down in the first rainstorm. It would have become a sitting duck for enemy artillery. Just like the Persian elephants, it was a weapon of shock and awe that probably wouldn't survive a protracted engagement. Yet the idea persisted. The drawing survived. It was copied and circulated. And 400 years later, when the British rolled the first land ships, Mark I tanks, across the mud of the Somme in World War I, they were fulfilling the promise of Leonardo's sketch. They finally had the internal combustion engine to replace the sweating men, and the caterpillar tracks to replace the thin wheels. But the DNA is there. The sloped armor, the turret, the psychological terror of the Iron Beast. Leonardo squeezes past you to check the alignment of a cannon. He seems oblivious to the fatal flaw in the gears. Or maybe he's smiling about it. He knows that this machine is too expensive, too heavy, and too weird for the Duke to actually build right now. It served its purpose. It got him the job. But he's not done with the Sassanid playbook yet. The Persians had another way of breaking infantry lines, something much faster, much gorier, and much simpler than a mechanical elephant. They had chariots, and they liked to attach sharp things to the wheels. Leonardo flips the page of his notebook. He is about to take us from the claustrophobic safety of the tank to the open-air butchery of the lawnmower of death. So, climb out of the hatch, take a deep breath of fresh air, and watch your ankles. Step back from the heavy, suffocating wooden shell of the tank and take a deep breath of fresh air. We are moving from the slow, creeping inevitability of the tortoise to the screaming speed of the hare. But this hare has knives attached to its feet. You are looking at one of the most infamous pages in Leonardo's military portfolio. It is a drawing that usually makes modern viewers wince. If the tank was a protective bunker, this machine is pure, unfiltered aggression. It is the scythed chariot. At first glance, it looks like something out of a Mad Max movie. You see a team of galloping horses pulling a twow-heeled chariot. But instead of a simple cart, the vehicle is a whirlwind of rotating blades. Large, curved scythes like the ones used by farmers to harvest wheat tar, sticking out from the main axle. As the wheels turn, the blades spin, creating a zone of death that extends 4 or 5 feet on either side of the chariot. But Leonardo wasn't satisfied with just ankle cutters. Look at the front of the machine. He has designed a complex gear system, because of course he has, that translates the forward motion of the wheels into the rotation of a horizontal bar. Mounted on this bar are 4 massive flails, spinning like the blades of a helicopter, but positioned at waist height. It is, for lack of a better term, a human lawnmower. Now pause the horror for a second and look at the history books on the shelf behind Leonardo. This machine is the smoking gun of his Persian obsession. This isn't an inspiration. This is a cover song. The scythed chariot was the signature weapon of the Achaemenid Empire. We have historical records of them being used by King Artaxerxes II and, most famously, by Darius III at the Battle of Gaugamela. In 331 BC, the Persians called them mowing chariots. They mounted long blades on the wheel hubs, designed to shear through the legs of enemy cavalry and infantry. The psychological impact was immense. Imagine seeing a chariot charging at you with swords spinning from its tires. It was designed to break the nerve of the opposing line. Leonardo has taken this ancient terror weapon and given it a Renaissance mechanical upgrade. The Persian blades were static. They just stuck out. Leonardo's blades move. He has applied his knowledge of differential gears to ensure that the blades spin faster than the wheels, turning the chariot into a mobile blender. This brings us to the darkest corner of Leonardo's imagination. Usually, his drawings are clean, clinical, and detached. He draws anatomy like a surgeon and machines like an architect. But look closely at the bottom of this page. He has drawn the results of the machine. It is gruesome. He sketches dismembered bodies scattering in the wake of the chariot. He draws legs severed at the shin, torsos cut in half. It is one of the few times in his notebooks where he explicitly depicts the gore of war. Why, historians argue about this theater of cruelty? Was Leonardo, the man who bought birds to set them free, secretly a sadist? Probably not. The prevailing theory is that this was marketing. Remember who he was working for? The Sforza family were not nice people. They were warlords who ruled by fear. Leonardo knew that to sell this machine, he couldn't just show the gears. He had to show the effect. He had to prove to the Duke that he had the stomach for necessary violence. It was a graphic novel panel designed to say, I can make your enemies look like this. But there is a massive reality check that Leonardo, for all his genius, seems to have ignored or, perhaps chosen to ignore, for the sake of a cool drawing. The scythed chariot was a tactical failure. By the time of Darius III, the Greeks had already figured out how to beat it. It turns out, horses are smart. They don't like running into solid walls of pikes, and they really don't like running into spinning metal blades that might accidentally clip their own legs. The Macedonian infantry at Gaugamela simply opened their ranks. They created lanes for the chariots to pass through harmlessly, then closed the ranks behind them and stabbed the drivers from the back. The ultimate weapon drove through empty space and was then dismantled. Leonardo's version has the same flaw. It requires a flat, open plain, rare in Italy, a cooperative enemy who stands still to be mowed down, and horses that are suicidal. Furthermore, look at the mechanics of the spinning flails in the front. Leonardo has connected them to the main axle. This creates a terrifying feedback loop. If the blades hit something hard like a shield, a bone, or a thick piece of armature, resistance transfers back through the gears to the wheels. This would likely cause the wheels to lock up, sending the horses tumbling face first into the dirt and possibly catapulting the driver into his own spinning knives. It is a machine that is more dangerous to the user than the enemy. This is the friendly fire paradox of the Renaissance. But there is a deeper layer to this drawing. Leonardo includes a note next to it that reveals his ambivalence. He writes that these chariots often did no less injury to their friends than to their enemies. He knew the history. He knew they were dangerous liabilities. So why draw it? This brings us to the encyclopedic theory. Leonardo wasn't just designing for the next battle. He was trying to compile a complete visual encyclopedia of human technology. He wanted to document every way force could be applied to matter. The scythed chariot was a study in rotary motion applied to warfare. It was an intellectual exercise. He was looking at the Persian design and asking, how would I make this mechanically perfect, regardless of whether it was tactically sound? It's also a study in fear. Leonardo was fascinated by the face of anger and terror. He did studies of warriors screaming, their faces contorted. This machine was an engine of fear. Even if it never killed a single person, the noise of those gears and the glint of those spinning blades would cause panic. And in the mercenary wars of Italy, where battles were often decided by maneuvering and morale rather than mass slaughter, panic was a valid weapon. As you stare at the chaotic lines of the galloping horses, you realize that this machine is the evil twin of the agricultural machines he was also designing. In other notebooks, he designs automated harvesters with similar spinning blades to cut wheat. It's a chilling reminder that the mechanics of feeding people and the mechanics of killing them are often identical. A scythe is a tool or a weapon, depending on who is standing in front of it. But the scythe chariot, like the giant crossbow, suffers from a rate of fire problem. It's a one-shot weapon. Once it passes through the line, it has to turn around, which is hard with the chariot, and charge again. Leonardo realizes that modern warfare, his modern, is moving away from shock charges and toward volume of fire. The introduction of gunpowder has changed the rhythm of battle. It's no longer about the single devastating blow. It's about putting as much lead in the air as possible. He looks at the single slow-firing cannons of the day and shakes his head. They are too slow. By the time you swab the barrel, pour the powder, and load the ball, the enemy cavalry is on top of you. He needs a machine gun. But he doesn't have the metallurgy for automatic goose-operated reloading. So, he looks back to the Sassanid archers. The Persians were famous for their cloud of arrows, firing in volleys to saturate an area. Leonardo wonders, how do I replicate 1,000 archers with one machine? He turns the page. He starts to sketch a gun, but it doesn't have one barrel. It has 10, then 30, then a fan shape. He is designing the organ gun, the rebel. He is about to invent the concept of saturation fire. Let's leave the bloody tracks of the chariot and walk over to the firing range, where Leonardo is setting up a machine that looks like a church pipe organ, but plays a much deadlier tune. Step away from the gore of the scythed chariot and wipe the imaginary blood from your boots. We are moving from the barbaric slashing of the ancient world to the loud, smoky, industrial future. You are standing on the edge of a firing range outside Milan, and Leonardo is adjusting the elevation screw on a machine that looks confusingly like a musical instrument. You are looking at the Rebaldicon, or, as it is more commonly known, the organ gun. At first glance, it seems absurd. It's a cart carrying not one, but 10, 12, or sometimes 33 gun barrels arranged in a row or a fan shape. It looks like the pipe organ from a cathedral has been stolen, mounted on wheels, and pointed at the French army. But don't let the name fool you. This is the ancestor of the machine gun. To understand why Leonardo is building this, we have to look back at the Sassanid archers one last time. The Persians and later the Mongols didn't win battles by having the biggest arrows. They won by having the most arrows. They practiced a doctrine of saturation. They would darken the sky, raining down thousands of projectiles per minute to suppress enemy movement. It wasn't about accuracy, it was about volume. Leonardo looks at the arquebusiers musketeers of his day and sees a problem. They are slow. A soldier has to pour powder, ram the ball, prime the pan, and light the match. It takes a minute or more between shots. In that minute, a Sassanid horseman could ride you down and cut your head off. The rate of fire gap was the biggest weakness of early gunpowder weapons. So, Leonardo asks the Sassanid question, how do I darken the sky with lead? Since he can't make a gun that loads itself, that tech is centuries away, he does the next best thing. He puts a lot of guns next to each other. Take a closer look at the sketch he's holding. He has designed a carriage with 33 small caliber cannons. But here is the genius part. They aren't just bolted on randomly. They are arranged in a triangular prism 3 rows of 11 guns each. This is the rotating reload system, and it is brilliant. Imagine the battle. The first row of 11 guns is facing the enemy. Boom! A volley of 11 shots goes off instantly, acting like a giant shotgun blast. While the smoke clears, the crew uses a crank to rotate the prism. The second row of guns, which is already loaded, clicks into position. Boom! Another volley. Meanwhile, the third row is on the bottom, cooling off, and the crew is frantically reloading the first row, which is now facing the rear. Fire, rotate, reload, fire, rotate, reload. Leonardo has invented the continuous fire cycle. He has turned the sporadic pop, top, pop, pop of Renaissance warfare into a rhythmic boom, boom, boom. It is the mechanical equivalent of the Persian archer who can hold 3 arrows in his hand while shooting a 4th. But look at the other design on the table, the fan gun. In this version, the barrels are arranged in a wide horizontal arc, like a spread deck of cards. This solves a different tactical problem. The triangular gun concentrates fire on one point, good for punching through armor. The fan gun spreads fire across a wide area, good for mowing down a charging line of infantry. Leonardo is applying geometry to slaughter. He is asking, do I need a line segment of death or a cone of death? Here is a scholarly reality check. Leonardo didn't invent the rebolt. They had been around since the 14th century. The English used a version during the 100 Years' War, but the earlier versions were crude, heavy blocks of iron that were impossible to aim. If the enemy was standing slightly to the left, you had to pick up the whole cart and turn it. Leonardo's contribution? The Persian polishes the carriage. You watch him grease the worm gear on the side of the mount. He has added a screwjack elevation mechanism. With a few turns of a handle, a single gunner can tilt the entire battery of guns up or down with millimeter precision. He has taken a clumsy medieval blunt instrument and turned it into a precision tool. He has also added lighter, larger wheels and a trail the back part of the carriage that makes it easier to tow. He treats the gun like a vehicle, not a statue. But there is a quirky, chaotic element to this machine that Leonardo's beautiful drawings often hide. The recoil, physics, is a harsh mistress. Sir Isaac Newton hasn't been born yet to explain that for every action. There is an equal and opposite reaction, but Leonardo is about to learn it the hard way. When you fire 11 cannons simultaneously, the recoil force is massive. In tests, these machines would often jump backward violently, digging their wheels into the mud or even flipping over. If the ground wasn't perfectly flat, the fan of death might end up pointing at the sky or at your own feet after the first shot. Leonardo tries to solve this by adding spikes to the wheels or heavy trails to dig into the ground, but it's a constant struggle against the energy he is unleashing. And then there is the chain fire risk. You are watching a crew member pour loose gunpowder into the touch holes of the 11 barrels. He connects them with a train of powder so they all go off at once. But this is dangerous. If a spark jumps to the second row of guns, the ones pointing at the crew, you have a catastrophe. Leonardo designs protective flaps and covers to prevent this, showing his obsession with safety features. He is one of the first engineers to think about operator safety in weapon design. As you stand there, deafened by the test fire, you realize that Leonardo is wrestling with the concept of force multiplication. A single soldier operating this crank can do the work of 33 musketeers. This is the industrialization of war. It reduces the need for skilled soldiers. You don't need to aim. You just point the machine in the general direction of the bad guys and turn the handle. This connects back to the Sassanid philosophy of the machine. Just as the traction trebuchet made the individual strength of a man irrelevant compared to the group. The organ gun makes the individual marksman irrelevant compared to the mechanism. Leonardo sketches a note about the smoke. After one volley, the cloud of white smoke is so thick you can't see the enemy. He realizes that this machine creates its own fog of war. He wonders if he can use this. Can the smoke be a screen? Can he mix sulfur in to make it choking? The ghost of the chemical warfare we saw at Durya whispers in his ear. But despite the lethality, there is something undeniably artistic about the sketch. The barrels are arranged with perfect symmetry. The carriage has elegant curves. Leonardo can't help himself. He makes the instrument of death look beautiful. He dips his pen and adds a flourish to the wheels. He isn't just drawing a gun. He is drawing a statement piece. He wants the Duke to look at this and see a sculpture that happens to kill people. This brings us to a fascinating contradiction in Leonardo's character. He calls war beastly madness, yet he spends hours perfecting the curvature of a gun barrel. Is he compartmentalizing, or does he see beauty in the function? He sees the perfect release of energy. The explosion is just another form of fluid dynamics, like water or wind. The violence is secondary to the physics. As the smoke clears and the ringing in your ears subsides, look at the page again. Leonardo has drawn the barrels stripped of their casing, showing the underlying geometry. It looks like a flower opening or a bird's wing. He is hiding the brutality under a veneer of aesthetic perfection. And this is his signature move. He seduces the viewer with the beauty of the blueprint, making you forget that the end result is a field of corpses. Let's explore this aesthetic camouflage. Let's look at why Leonardo made his machines look like art objects, and how he used beauty to sell the idea of destruction to his patrons. Step away from the smoke and noise of the firing range and retreat back into the quiet sanctuary of Leonardo's studio. The sun is streaming through the high windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. On the table before you lies one of his massive notebooks, perhaps the Codex Atlanticus or the Codex Madrid. You lean in to examine a drawing of a multi-barreled cannon, and you realize something strange. It's beautiful. It shouldn't be. It's a machine designed to tear human bodies apart with hot lead. It should be ugly, jagged, and frightening. But under Leonardo's hand, the weapon has the elegance of a Renaissance sculpture. The barrels flare with the grace of a trumpet. The wooden carriage has the curvature of a violin. Even the gears are drawn with a loving attention to light and shadow, gleaming as if they were made of polished silver. You are witnessing the beautification of violence. This is a stark departure from the Sassanid and medieval manuals we looked at earlier. The diagrams in the House of Wisdom were functional to D-schematics, flat, dry, and purely informational. They were instructions. Leonardo's drawings are seductions. Why did he do this? Why make a tank look like a jewel box? First, consider the sales pitch. You have to remember who his client is. Ludovico Sforza is a duke, but he is also a Renaissance prince. He collects art, he hosts poetry readings, he wears silk. He doesn't just want a weapon, he wants a status symbol. He wants the Ferrari of artillery. Leonardo knows that to sell the machine, he has to sell the aesthetic of the machine. He is the first industrial designer. He understands that form follows function, but form also opens the wallet. If he presented a crude, ugly sketch, the Duke might see it as a desperate measure. By presenting a polished, geometrically perfect rendering, Leonardo says, this war will be orderly. This war will be elegant. This war will be a masterpiece. He is sanitizing the horror of the battlefield for a client who will likely watch the battle from a safe distance on a hill. But there is a deeper, more philosophical reason, and it brings us back to his obsession with nature. Flip the page. You see a study of a lifting jack. Next to it, you see a study of a human arm. To Leonardo, these are the same picture. He views the machine as an extension of biology. He believes that nature is the ultimate engineer, and that human invention is just mimicry of divine mechanics. A lever is a bone, a rope is a tendon, a pump is a heart, because he believes nature is inherently beautiful and perfectly proportioned. He believes machines must be too. He applies the golden ratio to his catapults. He ensures the curves of the wooden beams follow the same mathematical spirals found in snail shells or the arrangement of sunflower seeds. He isn't just decorating, he is trying to align his inventions with the fundamental laws of the universe. He thinks that if a machine is ugly, it probably won't work because it violates the natural order. This is the Vitruvian machine. Just as he fit the human body into the perfect circle and square, he tries to fit the cannon into the realm of divine geometry. You notice a specific technique he uses to show this off: the exploded view. Getty Images look at this drawing of a weight-driven motor. Leonardo has pulled the components apart, floating them in space, so you can see how the shaft fits into the gear and the gear fits into the housing. This technique, which he perfected building on Francesco di Giorgio Martini's work, allows him to show the internal beauty of the mechanism. Before this, engineers drew machines from the outside, like a black box. Leonardo strips the skin off. He invites you to admire the guts. It's an act of intimacy. He wants you to see the logic of the gear train, the soul of the machine. It's the same way he draws anatomical dissections, peeling back the chest wall to reveal the heart. To him, the heart valves and the water valves are siblings. There is a quirky, almost whimsical habit he has that you might catch in the margins. Next to a terrifying design for a scythed chariot or a mortar, you will often find a doodle of a flower, a braid of hair, or a geometric pattern. Historians love to analyze this juxtaposition. Is it ADHD? Is it irony? Or is it a visual connection? When he draws water turbulence, he draws it looking like flowing hair. When he draws the smoke from a cannon, he draws it looking like a blooming flower. He sees the same patterns of turbulence and growth in everything. The explosion of the organ gun isn't chaos to him, it's just another form of fluid dynamics, expanding in a predictable, beautiful shape. But there is a scholarly debate here that casts a shadow on all this beauty. It's the paper tiger theory. Some historians argue that the beauty of these drawings is actually a mask for their impracticality. They suggest that Leonardo knew he couldn't actually build half of this stuff. The metallurgy wasn't there. The power sources were too weak, so he overcompensated with artistic flair. If the machine can't work in reality, it has to work perfectly on paper. The drawing is the final product. It's like a concept car at an auto show that has no engine but looks incredible. Was Leonardo selling vaporware? Maybe. But look closely at the shading on the giant crossbow again. He uses wash and chalk to give it volume. He wants it to feel heavy. He wants the viewer to feel the weight of the timber and the coldness of the iron. This isn't the drawing of a con artist. It's the drawing of a dreamer who desperately wants it to be real. He is trying to bridge the gap between the Sassanid past and the industrial future with ink. The Sassanids had the raw power. The future will have the precision. Leonardo is stuck in the middle in the 15th century, with a foot in both worlds. He uses art to fill the gap. As you turn another page, you see a design for a fortress. It is star-shaped with complex angular walls designed to deflect cannon fire. It is a masterpiece of geometry. It looks like a snowflake. This is the evolution of the hidden history. The Sassanids dug tunnels and built square walls. Leonardo realizes that with the advent of the cannon, the descendant of the firepot, the square wall is dead. You need angles. You need geometry to defeat energy. He turns the fortress into a mathematical puzzle that the enemy can't solve. But here is the tragedy of the beauty of blueprint violence. Paper is patient. Paper doesn't crack. Paper doesn't rust. On these pages, the gears never jam. The ropes never snap. The horses never panic. In the perfect world of the notebook, the machine works every time. Leonardo is safe here. He is the god of this 2D universe. He can control every variable. But he can't stay in the notebook forever. The Duke is paying for results, not sketches. The Duke wants to see the metal. He wants to hear the roar. You watch Leonardo close the book. The dust motes are still dancing in the light. He runs his hand over the leather cover. He looks tired. He knows that the moment he takes these beautiful, perfect ideas out of the studio and into the mud of the courtyard, things are going to go wrong. The Persian inspiration, The dream of the unstoppable machine is about to collide with the Italian reality: shoddy iron, wet wood, and the unyielding laws of friction. We are about to leave the pristine world of art and go to the test site. And spoiler alert, it's not going to go well. The breakdown is coming. Step out of the warm, sun-drenched studio and into the grim, gray reality of a Lombardy autumn. The beautiful, glowing drawings of the Codex Atlanticus are left behind on the desk. You are now standing ankle-deep in mud on a testing ground just outside the Castello Sforzesco. The air smells of wet wool, ozone, and the distinct metallic scent of anxiety. Leonardo is pacing. He's wearing a heavy cloak, his fine pink tunic hidden from the drizzle. He looks older here. The stress of the Duke's court is wearing on him. He isn't the carefree artist releasing birds in the market anymore. He's a contractor who is behind schedule and over budget. You are here to witness the moment where the rubber meets the road, or rather, where the wood meets the mud. In front of you stands a prototype. It's not the full-scale 80-foot crossbow, thankfully, but a smaller proof-of-concept model for a rapid loading mechanism. Or perhaps the chassis of the armored car. It's built of heavy oak, reinforced with iron bands forged by the best smiths in Milan. On paper, it was a symphony of geometry. Here in the rain, it looks heavy, sullen, and uncooperative. The Duke, Ludovico Sforza, is watching from a dry pavilion. He's tapping his fingers impatiently. He didn't pay for potential, he paid for kinetic. Leonardo gives the signal. The crewmuscular men stripped to their waists, despite the cold grab the cranks. This is the moment the Sassanid dream of automation is supposed to come alive. The gears are supposed to mesh, the worm drive is supposed to lock, and the machine is supposed to perform a feat of superhuman strength. Grind. A terrible, agonizing sound tears through the air. It's the sound of wood screaming against wood. The crew strains, veins popping in their necks. The machine shudders. A gear tooth carved from seasoned hardwood snaps with the volume of a pistol shot. Splinters fly. The mechanism jams. The machine doesn't move. You watch Leonardo's face. It's a mask of frustration. He rushes forward, ignoring the mud ruining his boots. He starts shouting at the foreman, blaming the grease, the wood, the alignment. But deep down, he knows the truth. The truth is friction. This is the great enemy that no amount of beautiful drawing can defeat. In his notebooks, Leonardo treats friction as an abstract variable. He studies it. Sure, he's actually the first person to scientifically study the laws of friction, Hamilton's laws, realizing that the resistive force is proportional to the weight. But knowing the law and beating the law are two different things. The reality check hitting him right now is that 15th century materials are garbage compared to 15th century ideas. The wood swells in the humidity, changing the tolerances. The iron gears are hand-forged, meaning they aren't perfectly uniform. One gear might be a millimeter wider than its neighbor. In a simple machine, that's fine. In the complex compound gear trains, Leonardo is designing inspired by the delicate clockwork of the East. That millimeter is a catastrophe. He is trying to build a Swiss watch out of garden furniture. This failure highlights a massive scholarly debate regarding Leonardo's career as an engineer. Was he a man ahead of his time, or was he a man ignoring his time? Some historians argue that his failure to produce working war machines wasn't just about materials. It was about a lack of practical focus. He would design a cannon, then get distracted by the geometry of the smoke, then start wondering why the sky is blue, and never actually finish the firing pin. As the crew tries to pry the jammed gear loose with a crowbar, you see the difference between the Sassanids and Leonardo. The Sassanid traction trebuchet was loose. It was a rope and a beam. It had slop built into it. If it wobbled, it still worked. Leonardo's machines are tight. They require precision that doesn't exist yet. He has engineered himself into a corner where perfection is the minimum requirement for function. There is a quirky, humanizing detail found in his notebooks from this period. Amidst the grand designs and the failed tests, Leonardo writes mundane shopping lists by chalk, by charcoal. Get the book on anatomy by pink tights. It's a reminder that the genius who failed to revolutionize warfare was also a guy who needed to run errands. It grounds the failure. He's not a wizard, he's a freelancer having a bad week. But the failure on the testing ground is nothing compared to the tragedy of the Gran Cavallo. While not a war machine per se, this project is the ultimate symbol of his failure of practicality. For years, Leonardo has been working on a massive bronze horse for the Duke, the largest equestrian statue in the world. He has designed a revolutionary mold to cast it in one piece. He has solved the metallurgy. He has built a full-scale clay model that is the wonder of Milan. But war ruins everything. As the political situation heats up, the French are coming. The Duke looks at the tons of bronze set aside for the horse and does the math. He doesn't need a statue, he needs cannons. You watch as the bronze meant for Leonardo's masterpiece is carted away to the foundry to be melted down into crude, ugly artillery pieces. The clay horse is left to rot in the courtyard, where invading French archers will later use it for target practice. It is a heartbreaking moment, Leonardo notes in his diary with devastating brevity. I will not speak of the horse. This is the collision of the ideal and the real. Leonardo wanted to elevate the technology of war into art. He wanted the cannons to be beautiful and the machines to be elegant. But war is ugly. War is pragmatic. The Duke chooses the crude working guns over the theoretical, perfect horse. Back on the muddy field, the test is called off. The Duke rides away, looking disappointed. Leonardo is left standing by his broken machine. He runs his hand over the cold iron of the jammed crank. He realizes that he can't just be an inventor. He has to be a scientist. He has to understand why the wood failed. He has to understand the hidden forces of nature: stress, strain, torque. This failure pushes him deeper into theory. He retreats from the workshop to the desk. If he can't build it in the real world, he will build it perfectly in the notebook, where physics can't hurt him. But he also realizes he has competition. He isn't the only genius wandering around Italy. There are others, younger, hungrier, and perhaps more practical men, and one of them is about to cross his path, sparking a rivalry that will push Leonardo to dig even deeper into the hidden history to find an edge. As he walks back to the castle, scraping the mud from his boots, he isn't defeated, he's angry. And a motivated, angry Leonardo is a dangerous thing. He's going to stop playing nice with the laws of physics, leave the mud of Milan and the disappointments of the Sforza court. Fast forward a few years to 1504. You are back in Florence, but the vibe has changed. The city isn't just bustling, it's tense. The Republic has been restored, the Medici are out for now, and the air is thick with the electricity of a heavyweight title fight. You are standing in the Piazza della Signoria, and you are about to witness the greatest rivalry in the history of art. On one side you have Leonardo da Vinci, now in his 50s. He is the established master, dressed in his rose-colored tunics, smelling of lavender and intellectual superiority. He is the man who knows the secrets of the Sassanid engineers, the man who draws tanks and helicopters. On the other side, you have the challenger, Michelangelo Buonarroti. He is 29 years old. He is short, has a broken nose, smells like stone dust and unwashed sweat, and has a chip on his shoulder the size of the David. They hate each other. This isn't a polite, professional disagreement. This is open hostility. You watch a scene unfold that Vasari later described. Leonardo is walking through the square, discussing a passage from Dante with some friends. Michelangelo passes by. Leonardo, trying to be condescendingly polite, says, "Ask Michelangelo, he will explain it to you." Michelangelo, taking this as a mockery of his lack of formal education, snaps back, "Explain it yourself. You who made the design of a horse to be cast in bronze, and unable to cast it, abandoned it in shame." He called Leonardo a failure, a quitter, a man who can't finish what he starts. This rivalry drives Leonardo insane. Michelangelo represents everything Leonardo is not: brute force, intense focus, and an obsession with the human body as the only subject that matters. Michelangelo doesn't care about birds or water currents or Sassanid catapults. He cares about muscle. So, when the city of Florence commissions both men to paint massive battle murals on opposite walls of the Hall of the 500 in the Palazzo Vecchio, Leonardo decides he needs to crush the kid. He needs to show Florence that he isn't just a painter. He is a scientist of war. He dives back into his notebooks. He digs deeper into the hidden history than ever before. Michelangelo is going to paint the Battle of Castiana scene of soldiers bathing. It's basically an excuse to paint a bunch of naked guys flexing. It's static, it's sculpture and paint. Leonardo decides to go the other way. He chooses the Battle of Anghiari. He wants to paint the Pazzia Bestialissimo, the most beastly madness. He pulls out his old sketches of the scythed chariots. He looks at the studies of the Sassanid war elephants. He realizes that to beat Michelangelo, he has to paint the energy of war, not just the anatomy. He wants to paint the psychological terror that his machines were designed to inflict. You watch him in his studio at Santa Maria Novella. He is sketching horses, but they aren't normal horses. They are monsters. Their eyes are rolling back, their teeth are bared, their ears are pinned. They look like they are screaming. He is channeling the fury of the Persian cavalry charges he read about in the ancient texts. He is turning the horses into biological tanks. But the rivalry pushes him to look for an even bigger ancient secret. He doesn't just want to outcompose Michelangelo, he wants to out-engineer him on the wall itself. Leonardo is tired of fresco. Fresco painting on wet plaster is a pain. You have to work fast before the plaster dries. It forces you to work in patches. Leonardo hates being rushed. He wants to layer his paints to create the smoky sfumato effects he loves. So he goes hunting in the library again. He finds a recipe from Pliny the Elder, the Roman naturalist. It describes an ancient technique called encaustic painting with wax-based pigments that are heat-set. It was used by the Romans and the Greeks to paint their ships and statues. It's vibrant, it allows for oil-like blending, and it's durable. Leonardo thinks, this is it. This is my secret weapon. Michelangelo will be painting in boring old fresco, and I will be resurrecting the lost technology of the Caesars. He is applying his engineering mind to art. He is trying to solve the problem of painting with the same logic he used to, solve the reload time of the cannon. You watch him apply the wax mixture to the wall of the Great Council Hall. It looks magnificent. The colors are deep and rich. The battle scene is a swirling vortex of violence, men and horses biting each other, swords clashing, dust rising. It is the visual equivalent of the noise of the organ gun. It makes Michelangelo's bathing soldiers look like a calm day at the spa. But then, the ghost of the ancients strikes again. The paint isn't drying, the hall is damp, the wax is dripping. Leonardo, the master engineer, comes up with a solution. He brings in massive braziers, giant coal-fired heaters. He sets them up at the base of the wall to generate heat and set the wax, just as Pliny described. You stand there, sweating in the intense heat, watching the tragedy unfold. The heat rises. The bottom of the painting dries perfectly. It looks like a jewel, but heat rises too well. The top of the painting gets too hot. Suddenly, you see a streak of color run down the wall. Then another, the wax is melting. The beautiful screaming horses of Anghiari are dissolving into a puddle of gray sludge on the floor. Leonardo stares at the wall. He has been defeated by physics again. He understood the chemistry, but he miscalculated the thermodynamics of the large hall. Michelangelo, meanwhile, never even finishes his painting. He gets called away to Rome by the Pope, but the damage is done. The rumor spreads. Leonardo tried a weird trick and ruined it. This failure changes him. You can see it in his eyes. He realizes that he can't win the game of finish the product. He can't build the tank because the wood breaks. He can't paint the masterpiece because the wax melts. He can't cast the horse because the bronze is stolen. So he retreats further into the one place where he is the undisputed king, the notebook. He starts to obsess over the micro. If he can't control the macro, the wall, the bronze, the war, he will control the smallest things. He starts dissecting the human eye. He studies the flow of blood in the heart. He is looking for the prime mover, the secret mechanism that drives the universe. But the rivalry with Michelangelo did something important. It forced Leonardo to codify his knowledge of war. In preparing for the painting, he organized all his studies of horses, weapons, and dust. He created a visual database of violence that would influence artists for centuries. Rubens, Raphael, they all copied the Battle of Anghiari before it was lost. And amidst this failure, a new threat looms. The political situation in Italy is collapsing. The French are back. The Spanish are coming. The petty squabbles between artists in Florence are about to be drowned out by the roar of real cannons that look suspiciously like the ones Leonardo tried to design. He packs his bags again. Florence is too small for him. Michelangelo is too annoying. He needs a patron who understands him. He looks north to the very people invading his country. The French, it's a traitorous move perhaps. But Leonardo is a citizen of the world, and the King of France has a very deep interest in machines. Stand on the ramparts of a generic Italian fortress, pick one. It doesn't matter, because they are all about to become obsolete. The year is 1494, and then again in 1499. The sky is dark with the smoke of a new kind of war. You are witnessing the French Fury, the invasion of King Charles VIII and later Louis XII, which is sweeping down the Italian peninsula like a pyroclastic flow. For decades, Leonardo and his Italian contemporaries played with the idea of war. They drew elegant machines and notebooks. They conducted polite sieges that lasted months, where commanders exchanged wine and insults. But the French, they didn't get the memo about the politeness. They brought the future with them. You look down at the road leading to the castle. Usually, you'd expect to see a slow-moving train of oxen dragging massive stone-throwing bombards, the kind that take a week to set up. Instead, you see horses, fast, sweating horses, galloping in teams, pulling sleek bronze tubes mounted on twow-heeled carriages. This is the nightmare Leonardo predicted in his letter to the Duke. This is mobile artillery. The French engineers have solved the weight problem. Instead of using massive iron hoop guns that fire stone balls, they are using cast bronze guns that fire iron balls. Iron is denser than stone. You can use a smaller ball to do the same damage. Smaller ball means smaller gun. Smaller gun means you can put it on wheels and drive it like a Ferrari. Watch as they unlimber the guns. It takes minutes, not hours. They have trunnions, two little nubs, cast into the side of the barrel that allow it to pivot on the carriage. The gunners adjust the elevation instantly. Boom! The sound is sharper, higher pitched than the dull thud of the old bombards. The iron ball screams through the air and smashes into the tall, thin medieval curtain wall. It doesn't shatter like stone. It punches, it penetrates. You turn to look at Leonardo, who is standing nearby, observing the carnage. He isn't panicked, he is vindicated. For years, he had been sketching guns on wheels. He had been telling the Sforzas, "You need mobility. You need to move fast." They listened politely but kept buying the big, heavy status symbol guns. Now, the French are proving him right by destroying the Sforza dukedom in record time. There is a famous saying about this invasion. The French conquered Italy with chalk. Why? Because they moved so fast that their quartermasters would ride ahead and simply mark the doors of the houses where the officers would. Sleep that night with chalk. They didn't need to siege, they just walked in. The Italians were so terrified of the guns that they surrendered before the chalk was even dry. Leonardo, ever the pragmatist, realizes that his employment contract with the Sforzas is essentially null and void, mostly because the Duke is currently fleeing or being captured. Does he fight to the death? No. He packs up his notebooks and gets ready to introduce himself to the new management. But look at what he does during this chaotic transition. He inspects the French guns. He acts as a forensic scientist of warfare. He notices the corning of the gunpowder. The French and the best Italian gunners aren't using fine powder anymore, which packs down tight and burns unevenly. They are using corned powder grains the size of rice. This allows oxygen to circulate between the grains, creating an instant explosive burn. It increases the velocity of the shot massively. Leonardo rushes back to his desk wherever he is hiding and sketches the He realizes that with this higher velocity, the flat trajectory he dreamed of for his giant crossbow is now a reality. You don't need to lob things anymore. You can shoot straight. This changes architecture forever. Leonardo looks at the tall, square towers of the Italian castles crumbling under the iron balls. He realizes the Sassanid wall is dead. If you build a wall high, you are just building a bigger target. He starts to sketch a new kind of wall. Low, thick, angled. You see him drawing the Star Fortress Italian. He banks the earth up against the walls to absorb the shock. He creates complex geometric angles so that every inch of the wall is covered by flanking fire from another wall. He is applying the geometry of the scythed chariot. The idea of the killing Zone 2 architecture, he is designing a fortress that acts like a machine. There is a quirky, almost traitorous reality to Leonardo's life during these years. He is often criticized for being a mercenary without loyalty. He works for the Sforzas. Then he works for Caesar Borgia, the son of the Pope, and a certifiable psychopath. Then he works for the French king who defeated the Sforzos. But look at it from his perspective. He isn't loyal to a flag, he is loyal to the engineering. He wants to see his machines built. If the French king has the foundry and the money to build the ideal city, or the perfect canal, then vive la or... In fact, he becomes fascinated by the French king. Francis I, who appears a bit later in the timeline, but represents the culmination of this French relationship. Francis is a giant of a man who loves art and war in equal measure. He looks at Leonardo not as a servant, but as a father figure. It is under the French sphere of influence that Leonardo finally feels understood. The Italians wanted him to paint, the French want him to think, but the violence of the invasion leaves a mark on his work. You see a shift in his drawings. The Battle of Anghiari sketches were full of rage. His later deluge drawings, apocalyptic visions of water destroying the world, are full of resignation. He realizes that no machine can stop the chaos. The perfect war he tried to design, the elegant geometric war, doesn't exist. Real war is messy, loud, and ruins the fresco, yet he keeps documenting. He sketches the French camps, he studies their logistics. He notices they use standardized carriage wheels. If a wheel breaks, they have a spare that fits. It's the Sassanid supply chain on steroids. He notes this down. Standardization is the key to speed. He also notices the medical consequences. The French guns cause wounds that the old surgeons don't know how to treat. A sword cut is clean. A cannonball grazes you and turns your flesh into pulp. He doubles down on his anatomical studies, not just for art, but to understand trauma. He draws the layers of the skin, the fascia, the muscle. He is creating the manual for the field medics of the future. As the smoke clears over Milan, Leonardo stands in the middle of a changed world. The Middle Ages are officially over. The age of the knight is dead. A peasant with a match and a bronze tube can kill a nobleman in full-plate armor from 500 yards away. The machines have won. Leonardo looks at his pile of notebooks. He has thousands of loose pages. Drawings of catapults next to grocery lists, sketches of tanks next to anatomy. It's a mess. He realizes that if he dies, this knowledge dies with him. He needs to organize it. He needs to compile the ultimate encyclopedia of his life's work. He doesn't know it yet, but these loose sheets will eventually be bound into the massive volumes we know today. And the biggest one of them all, the Codex Atlanticus, is about to become the ark that carries the Sassanid secrets into the future. Let's leave the battlefield, which is now just a muddy graveyard of broken walls and shattered timber, and go to the final resting place of these ideas. We are going to open the big book. Wash the mud of the French invasion off your hands and step into the hushed, climate-controlled reverence of the Biblioteca Ambrosiana in Milan. We are jumping forward in time to the present day, or perhaps stopping briefly in the late 16th century when a sculptor named Pompeo Leone was busy with a pair of scissors and a pot of glue. In front of you sits the holy grail of engineering history, the Codex Atlanticus. First, let's address the name. It sounds like something from an underwater civilization or a Don Brown novel. But the reality check is frustratingly mundane. It's called Atlanticus, not because it has anything to do with the ocean, but because the pages are the size of an atlas. It is a massive, physical object, a 1,119-page slab of history that requires 2 people to lift. Open the cover. You are looking at the single greatest junk drawer of the human mind. This isn't a book that Leonardo wrote. It is a scrapbook, compiled decades after his death by Pompeo Leone, who took thousands of loose sheets, Leonardo's receipts, his doodles, his masterpieces, his failures, and pasted them onto large backing sheets. Leone was trying to organize the chaos, but in doing so, he created a kaleidoscope of genius. As you turn the pages, you get literary whiplash. On one page, there is a study of the geometric proportions of a dodecahedron. On the back of that same sheet, there is a recipe for dyeing hair blonde. Next to that, a map of the Pontine Marshes. And right in the middle of it all, the machines of war. We are hunting for the Persian connection. We are looking for the specific drawings that prove Leonardo was the medium, through which the ancient East spoke to the modern West. Flip past the hydraulic pumps, flip past the parachute. There, stop. You are staring at folio for VB, or a similar designation, depending on the catalog. It's a drawing of a hoist. But look closely at the mechanism. It uses a lantern gear, a wooden wheel, with dowels instead of teeth. This is the signature of the Islamic engineers. You saw this exact gear in the water-raising machines of Al-Jazari. It is a distinct, low-friction design that originated in the irrigation ditches of the Middle East. Leonardo didn't reinvent this. He adopted it. He drew it with such precision that you can see the grain of the wood. He realized that this gear, designed to lift water for farmers in Syria, was perfect for lifting cannons for dukes in Milan. Turn another page. You find a sketch of a spring engine. It looks like a giant bow mounted on a frame. But look at the trigger. It's a tumbler lock. This is a piece of technology that traces its lineage back to the crossbows of the Chinese Han Dynasty, which traveled along the Silk Road, passed through the hands of the Sassanid weaponsmiths, and ended up here, drawn in red chalk by a Florentine artist. The Codex Atlanticus is the evidence locker. It proves that technology doesn't just appear, it evolves. But there is a scholarly debate that haunts this book. Why didn't he publish it? Leonardo had the printing press. Gutenberg had invented movable type decades earlier. Venice was pumping out books by the thousands. Why did Leonardo leave his genius rotting in a pile of loose papers? Some historians argue it was paranoia. They say he was afraid of plagiarists, a valid fear, considering he stole plenty of ideas himself. Others say it was his man without letters, insecurity. He feared that if he published in Italian, the vulgar tongue, rather than Latin, the academics would laugh at his grammar. But looking at the Codex, you get a different sense. It wasn't fear, it was speed. Leonardo's mind moved faster than the printing press. To publish a book, you have to say, "This is finished." Leonardo never finished anything. Every time he drew a machine, he saw a flaw, or a way to improve it, or a connection to a bird's wing he hadn't noticed before. The Codex is a document of a mind in constant motion. Publishing would have been freezing the water, and Leonardo loved the flow. As you scan the pages, you notice the recurring motif of the E-shape. You see it in the curve of a river. You see it in the flow of blood through a heart valve, and you see it in the recurve of the Sassanid-style bows he draws. He is obsessed with the S-curve because it is the shape of energy storage. A straight line is static. An S-curve is a spring. It is a wave. He realizes that the ancients used this shape intuitively in their composite bows, but he is trying to mathematize it. He writes notes about the geometry of the curve, trying to calculate the perfect ratio of elasticity. This is where the hidden history becomes undeniable. Leonardo isn't just copying the shape, he is trying to derive the law behind the shape. There is a tragic beauty to the physical state of the Codex. You see stains, some are ink blots, some might be wine, some are definitely candle wax. These pages were on his desk while he ate, while he worked, while he traveled. They survived the damp studios of Florence, the smog of Milan, and the saddlebags of his donkeys as he crossed the Alps to France. You find a page dedicated to the Archimedes steam cannon. This is a deep cut. Leonardo sketches a copper tube that sits in a brazier of coals. You pour water into the hot breech, it flashes to steam, and boom, it fires an iron ball. He attributes the idea to Archimedes, but the design details the valves. The breech-loading mechanisms of the pneumatic automata of the Banu Musa brothers. He is fusing Greek theory with Arab mechanics to create a steampunk weapon in the year 1490. It never really worked. Steam is finicky, but it shows his willingness to listen to the ghosts of engineering past. But the most telling pages are the empty ones, or rather, the ones that seem empty of machines. You find pages covered in geometry circles, triangles, squares, overlapping in dizzying patterns. This is the ludus geometricus geometric games. To the untrained eye, it looks like doodling, but to Leonardo, this was the source code. He believed that if he could solve the problem of squaring the circle, constructing a square with the same area as a circle, using only a compass and straightedge, he would unlock the secrets of the universe. He believed this geometric perfection was the key to building the perfect fortress, the perfect gear, the perfect tank. The Sassanid engineers built with instinct. Leonardo is trying to build with proof. As you reach the end of this massive volume, you realize that the Codex Atlanticus is not just a book of inventions. It is a bridge. It spans the gap between the medieval world of craft, where you build things because your master taught you how, and the modern world of engineering, where you build things because the math says they will work. The Sassanid catapult is on one side of that bridge. The Apollo rocket is on the other. And Leonardo is standing right in the middle, holding the hand of the past and pointing toward the future. But he is also holding a secret. As you close the heavy leather cover of the Codex, you have to wonder, did he know? Did he know that he was the vessel? Did he realize that he wasn't inventing these things, but merely remembering them? There is a concept in philosophy called anamnesis, the idea that learning is just remembering what the soul already knew. Leonardo, with his belief in the universal connection of all things, might have felt this. He often referred to himself as a disciple of experience, but his experience was filtered through the ink of 1,000 years of history. We have one last stop on this journey. We need to step back from the book and look at the man himself in his final years. We need to go to France, to a small chateau in the Loire Valley, where an old man with a long beard is waiting to die. He has one last lesson to teach us about the ghost in the machine. Walk through the misty vineyards of the Loire Valley. The sharp, cynical air of Italy is gone, replaced by the soft, verdant light of France. It is the spring of 1519. You approach a handsome manor house of red brick and white limestone. The Chateau Duclos. Upstairs, in a bedroom with a view of the royal castle of Amboise, an old man is dying. Leonardo da Vinci is 67 years old. His long beard is white as snow. He has had a stroke. His right hand, the hand that painted the Last Supper, though he was ambidextrous, the paralysis limits him, is clawed and useless. But his eyes are still clear. They are the same eyes that watched the bird in the Florence market, the same eyes that stared into the casting pits of Milan, sit by his bedside. The room is quiet, save for the crackling of a fire. The King of France, Francis I, frequently visits this room, sitting on a low stool to listen to the old man speak. The king calls him father. It is a tender end for a man who spent his life looking for a family. But Leonardo isn't looking at the king right now. He is looking at the stack of notebooks on his desk. This is the moment of the ghost in the machine. Throughout this journey, we have treated Leonardo as an inventor, a man who pulled ideas out of the void. But in this quiet room, with the shadow of death approaching, a different truth emerges. Leonardo wasn't just a generator of ideas. He was a receiver. Think back to the Sassanid engineer standing on the dunes of Think of the Arab scholar in the House of Wisdom. Think of the freezing monk in the scriptorium. They were all broadcasting a signal. They were transmitting the physics of the universe across time. Leonardo was simply the first person with an antenna sensitive enough to pick it up. He reaches out with his good left hand and touches a page. It's a study of water swirling around a rock. He realizes now that the water, the wind, the blood, and the gears are all obeying the same law. The ghost isn't a spooky spirit, it's the mathematical truth of nature. The Sassanids found it by accident when they twisted ropes. The Greeks found it with geometry. Leonardo found it by staring at everything until the patterns emerged. There is a philosophical concept called anamnesis, introduced by Plato. It suggests that learning isn't the acquisition of new knowledge, but the recollection of what the soul already knew before it was born. Leonardo, a Neoplatonist in many ways, embodies this. When he drew the tank or the catapult, he wasn't inventing in the modern sense of creating something new. He was remembering how the universe works. He was uncovering the latent potential of iron and wood. As you watch him, you sense a deep, melancholic humility. He wrote in his notebook, "Tell me if anything was ever done." It's a haunting question. He looks at his machines, the flying screw, the tank, the giant crossbow. None of them were built. None of them flew. None of them crushed a single enemy wall. By the standards of a modern CEO, Leonardo was a failure. He produced 0 units. But looking back at the Sassanid lineage, you see that his role wasn't to build, it was to preserve and refine. He was the filter. He took the brutal, practical mechanics of the ancient East, which were purely about killing, and filtered them through the lens of the Renaissance. He added beauty, he added humanity, he added the why. The Sassanid engineer asked, "How do I throw this rock?" Leonardo asked, "What is the nature of the force that throws the rock?" That shift in the question is the birth of modern science. You notice a small sketch near his bedside. It's not a machine, it's a drawing of a cat playing. He has drawn the cat in 20 different positions, its body a fluid curve of energy. He realizes that the cat is a better machine than anything he ever designed. Its muscles are the perfect levers, its tendons are the perfect ropes. He realizes that the ghost in the machine is life itself. He spent his career trying to build a mechanical bird, a mechanical man, a mechanical horse. He was trying to imbue dead matter with the spirit of the living. The Sassanid war elephants were biological tanks. Leonardo's tank was an attempt to make wood act like biology. This is the Frankenstein moment of the Renaissance. Leonardo didn't want to just make tools, he wanted to create life from metal. The room darkens as evening falls. You can almost feel the presence of the others in the room with him. Not the king, but the ancestors. The Banu Musa brothers are there, nodding at his gear trains. Tokola is there, critiquing his perspective. The anonymous Roman soldier who died in the gas tunnel at Durarapos is there. They are the silent chorus of engineering. Leonardo is their soloist. He whispers a final observation to his notebook or, perhaps just to the air. While I thought that I was learning how to live, I have been learning how to die. It sounds grim, but in the context of mechanics, it's profound. A machine dies when friction overcomes momentum. A spring dies when it loses its tension. Leonardo knows that his own spring is unwinding. The impetus is fading, but the signal is not. He knows, with a clarity that only comes at the end, that the notebooks will survive. He has left them to his student, Francesco Melzi. He has given strict instructions: keep them together. He knows that these pages contain the DNA of the future. He knows that one day, someone will have the materials, the aluminum, the titanium, the gasoline. He is passing the baton. The Sassanid handed it to the Arab handed it to the monk handed it to the artist, and now the artist is handing it to the future. You watch as he closes his eyes. The universal genius is shutting down. The vast library of his mind, the catalog of every gear, every vein, every leaf he ever saws, going dark. But look at the desk one last time. The candle is still burning next to the codex. The light flickers on a drawing of a spiral gear. The shadow of the gear stretches across the room, hitting the wall. In the flickering light, the shadow looks like it's moving. It looks like it's turning. The machine is still running. The ghost hasn't left the building. It has just moved into the paper. As you back out of the room, leaving the old man to his rest, you realize that the story isn't over. The death of Leonardo is just the end of the chapter. The next chapter is the Industrial Revolution, and every single engineer who will build a steam engine, a car, or a rocket will unknowingly be walking through the door that Leonardo held open. We have one final step to take. We need to zoom out. We need to leave the bedside of the dying genius and go way up to see the full arc of this incredible journey. We need to see how a Persian rock thrower became the modern world. Step away from the bedside of the dying master and float upwards through the ceiling of the Château du Clos-Luz, rising above the Loire Valley, above the Alps, and finally, above the timeline itself. We are going to take one last panoramic look at the journey we have just survived. From this altitude, the centuries blur, and the disparate dots we've connected the Sassanid forts, the libraries of Baghdad, the workshops of Florence, merge into a single glowing line. You are looking at the genealogy of an idea. When we started this trip in the dust of Durarapos, looking at a wooden beam hurling a rock, it seemed like a primitive act of violence. It was men sweating in the desert, using their muscles to kill other men. It was biological warfare in the most literal sense. But as we tracked that machine through time, we saw it shed its skin. We watched the idea of the catapult travel into the House of Wisdom, where the Arab mathematicians stripped away the wood and replaced it with geometry. They turned the brute force of the lever into an equation. They taught the machine to speak the language of math. Then we saw it smuggled into the freezing monasteries of Europe, hiding inside Bibles, surviving the dark ages of data loss. It was incubated by the Italian precursors Tokola and Francesco di Giorgio Martini, who gave it a new body of gears and cranks. They were the mechanics who kept the engine running when nobody else knew how to fix it. And finally, it landed on the desk of Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo didn't just inherit the machine, he gave it a soul. He took the ugly, practical devices of the past and subjected them to the Vitruvian treatment. He aligned them with the laws of nature. He turned the Sassanid rock thrower into a study of stored elastic energy. He turned the Persian scythed chariot into a study of rotary motion. He turned the chaotic cloud of arrows into the rhythmic precision of the organ gun. This is the circle closing. The Persian engineers solved the problem of how to break a wall. Leonardo solved the problem of how energy moves through matter. But there is a lingering, somewhat uncomfortable question that historians still argue about today. Did Leonardo actually matter? It's the tree falls in a forest debate of engineering. Since Leonardo didn't publish his notebooks, and since his machines were never mass-produced, did he actually influence the future? Or was he just a brilliant dead end, a man who saw the future but couldn't unlock the door? If you look strictly at the industrial timeline, the answer is depressing. The tank wasn't built until 1916. The helicopter wasn't practical until the 1930s. The machine gun waited for Hiram Maxim in the 1880s. You could argue that the world ignored Leonardo and reinvented these things from scratch centuries later. But that misses the point. The legacy of this journey isn't the hardware, it's the method. Leonardo was the first person to treat engineering as a visual science. Before him, machines were built by feel. After him, they were designed on paper. He invented the language of the blueprint. The exploded view, the cutaway, the component analysis, these are the tools that allowed the Industrial Revolution to happen. He didn't build the engine, but he wrote the manual on how to think about engines. And what about the Persian connection? It reminds us that there is no such thing as Western or Eastern science. There is only physics. The lever doesn't care if you pray to Ahura, Mazda, Allah, or Christ. The gear doesn't care if you speak Farsi or Italian. The technology is a universal heritage that flows like water, filling whatever vessel is available. In the 3rd century, the vessel was the Sassanid Empire. In the 9th, it was the Abbasid Caliphate. In the 15th, it was Renaissance Italy. Leonardo was simply the most beautiful vessel the water ever flowed through. As you look down at the timeline one last time, you realize that the ghost in the machine is still with us. Every time you see a modern tank with sloped armor, you are looking at the great-grandchild of Leonardo's wooden tortoise. Every time you see a helicopter rotor spinning, you are seeing the ghost of the Archimedes screw he sketched in the library. Every time you see a robotic arm in a car factory, you are seeing the descendant of the knight automaton he designed for a party in Milan. The materials change. We use carbon fiber instead of oak. We use jet fuel instead of sinew. But the geometry is eternal. There is a final, quirky reality check to leave you with. In 2002, a team of modern engineers actually built Leonardo's giant crossbow for a documentary. They used modern materials, but followed his design. They cocked it back. The tension was terrifying. They fired it. It worked. It didn't explode. It didn't shatter. It threw a massive log hundreds of yards with frightening accuracy. It proved that the man without letters wasn't crazy. He was right. The physics were sound. He was just waiting for us to catch up. So, the next time you look at a drawing by Leonardo maybe on a tote bag or a coffee mug do UNT, just see a Renaissance artist. See the Sassanid engineer standing behind him, handing him the rope. See the Arab scholar handing him the pen. See the chain of hands stretching back thousands of years, all working together to solve the same problem. How do we move the world? The answer, it turns out, was never about the machine. It was about the mind that imagined it. Note, I will now transition directly into the 300-word wind-down as per the instructions to finish the script. Now, let the noise of the battlefield fade away. Let the thunder of the organ guns and the screaming of the scythed chariots dissolve into the mist. We are done with the wars of the past. The dust of Dario repose has settled. The ink in the house of wisdom is dry. The mud of Milan has turned to stone. Take a deep breath. Let your shoulders drop. Unclench your jaw. You have traveled thousands of years and thousands of miles tonight, but now you are back in the safety of the present moment. The machines are quiet, the notebooks are closed. It is strange, isn't it? How much noise and fury can be contained in a few sheets of paper. How a man like Leonardo could hold so much violence in his mind and yet produce so much beauty. It reminds us that the human imagination is a vast, deep ocean. It can hold storms and shipwrecks, but at its bottom, it is silent and still. Picture that old man in the French chateau, watching the candle burn low. The struggle is over for him. The frustration of the jammed gears and the melted wax is gone. All that remains is the peace of knowing he tried. He looked at the world harder than anyone else, and in doing so, he gave us a new way to see. Think of his ideas not as failed inventions, but as seeds planted in the winter, waiting for the long spring of history to warm the earth enough for them to bloom. They are blooming now, all around us, in the hum of the city and the flight of the plane. So, as you drift off, let the geometry of the universe cradle you. The perfect circle, the gentle curve, the silent spinning wheel. The gears of the night are turning smoothly, watching over you. You are part of the chain now too. You have the knowledge. Good night, sweet dreams.